£45 in tax-free cash. Text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB03 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday the 29th of March. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if watching or listening on demand. Good luck.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Dubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise
and who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 12 o'clock on Thursday, the 14th of March.
And we're going to cross straight over to the Commons, where Communities Secretary Michael Gove is set to name, taking to the floor, he is set to name and shame extremists. We're just watching the House of Commons as Penny Mordaunt is still in there taking questions.
Indeed, we're looking at the end of Leaders' Questions, which is going to move in to Community Secretary, sometimes known as Levelling Up Secretary, Michael Gove, because this is the plan today, to name a new definition of extremism, which has already been released this morning, and then from the chamber of the House of Commons, telling the Commons first what groups are going to be added to the list of extremists. This is a big deal.
It is indeed. Michael Gove was on the channel earlier, and he was asked about potential difficulties with broadening this definition of extremism. And he was asked about the question of free speech. Will it inhibit free speech in this country? He says it absolutely won't. It will not curtail your free speech. In fact, it will uphold free speech and democracy by pinpointing exactly who these extremist groups are. We were talking earlier about how there are already many groups coming out to say that this is absolutely the wrong thing for the government to do, to broaden this definition, to name and shame groups that they deem to be extremist. We've had Muslim groups saying that the government is seeking seeking a solution to a problem that does not exist. We've had civil liberties groups talking about free speech.
And here's Michael Gove.
Yes.
I'd like to make a statement about the next steps that we are taking in the government's strategy to counter extremism and to build greater national resilience and social cohesion. The United Kingdom is a success story, a multinational, multi-ethnic, multi-faith democracy, stronger because of our diversity. But our democracy and our values of inclusivity and tolerance are under challenge from extremist groups which are radicalising our young people and driving greater polarisation within and between communities to further their own ends. In order to protect our democratic values and enhance social cohesion, it is important both to reinforce what we all have in common and to be clear and precise in identifying the dangers posed by extremism. As our new definition makes clear, extremism can lead to the radicalisation of individuals, deny people their full rights and opportunities, suppress freedom of expression, incite hatred, weaken social cohesion, and ultimately, it can lead to acts of terrorism. Most extremist materials and activities are not illegal and do not meet a terrorism or national security threshold. For example, Islamist and neo-Nazi groups in Britain are operating lawfully, but they advocate and work towards the replacement of democracy with an Islamist or Nazi society. The Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities has been working with local authorities, civil society and faith groups, especially in those areas where social cohesion is most under strain, to de-escalate tensions and to explore the most constructive support that we can offer. From our engagement, we hear widespread unease over the safety and security of community organisations, political candidates and elected officials. Councillors have been threatened with violence. Council meetings have been disrupted. Council officers and elected members talk of walking a tightrope, terrified of inadvertently saying the wrong thing, of offending one side or another. Many choose to remain silent, to take no action. Mr. Speaker, such is the chilling effect of these extremist groups on our democracy. It is, of course, gravely concerning that the conflict in the Middle East is driving further polarisation. We've seen a terrible increase in anti-Semitic and anti-Muslim hate crime, as well as a very significant increase in radicalisation. Troublingly, there is also evidence that some Islamists and extreme right-wing groups and others who seek to tear our society apart are working together to maximise the reach of their message and cause. And that is why the work of civil society organisations such as the Community Security Trust and Tel Mama, as well as Muslims Against Anti-Semitism, the educational charity Solutions Not Sides, and the Forum for Discussion of Israel and Palestine is so important. We've provided additional funding for the CST and Tel Mama to counter anti-Semitism and anti-Muslim hatred, and we will do more. We will shortly establish a new fund to provide additional, direct and tangible support for grassroots organisations, building bridges and fighting division. I wish to commend those doing so much to counter prejudice. In working with civil society, it's critically important that we do not, unwittingly or through ignorance, fund or otherwise support organisations or individuals who are themselves extremist. In the past, it has unfortunately been the case that extremist groups and actors have sought to present themselves as moderate voices, representative of majority or mainstream opinion. The government has had a definition of extremism since 2011. It has helped inform our prevent counter-terrorism work and was designed to assist the government in engagement. But in a considerable number of cases, organisations and individuals with views which are clearly extreme have nevertheless benefited from state engagement, endorsement and support, and furthermore have exploited that association to further their extremist agendas. Among the most significant was Shakil Beg, who was labelled an Islamist extremist by a judge. Mr. Beg, an NHS chaplain and regular speaker at state schools, ran the Lewisham Islamic Centre and was on both the Metropolitan Police's Independent Advisory Group in Lewisham and Lewisham's Standing Advisory Committee on Religious Education. In 2016, Mr. Beg sued the BBC when they described him, accurately, as an extremist. The judge in the case, Mr. Justice Haddon Cave, conducted his own scrupulous research, identifying many occasions where Mr. Beg had advocated extreme positions, including promoting and encouraging religious violence, by telling a Muslim audience that violence in support of Islam would constitute a man's greatest deed. Not only did Mr. Justice Haddon Cave dismiss Mr. Begg's claim, he drew specific attention to the danger of extremists exploiting sponsorship from state institutions. And he outlined the need for an updated and more precise definition of extremism to guide engagement by government and others. And we have since seen how figures of potential extremism concern have been able to work with the Crown Prosecution Service and the Metropolitan Police, co-opt charities, and indeed benefit from public funding. And we know from William Shawcross's excellent independent review of Prevent that such engagement has inadvertently provided a platform, funding, or legitimacy for groups or individuals who oppose our shared values. This apparent legitimising of their views can lead extremists of all ideologies to be emboldened and to exert greater influence. That's why today my department is publishing an updated, more precise and rigorous definition of extremism, alongside a set of cross-government engagement principles for use when engaging with external groups. There is also detailed guidance on what the definition does and does not capture. And we're also setting up a new counter-extremism centre of excellence in my department as a world-leading authority on best practice, data and research. Mr. Speaker, our plans, drawn up in close collaboration with the Home Office, will enable the government to express more clearly than ever before which groups fall within the extremism definition, and we can point to the evidence and explain the funding and engagement consequences. They will also support national efforts to counter the work of extremists who promote their ideologies both online and offline. The new definition will strengthen vital frontline counter-radicalisation work, and the new Centre of Excellence will also help us to understand the role played by state actors and state-linked organisations in extremist activity which is taking place in our country. And the wider knowledge of what constitutes extremist behaviour and who is behind it will, I hope, help all of us to identify potential threats and to take steps to challenge and marginalise them. Critically, the rights that we enjoy in the United Kingdom extend to everyone. Freedom of expression, freedom of religion and belief, the rule of law, upholding democracy and equal rights, these are the cornerstones of our civilised society, which as a government, as a parliament, on every side of this House, we strive always to uphold. So let me be clear, our definition will not affect gender-critical campaigners, those with conservative religious beliefs, trans activists, environmental protest groups, or those exercising their proper right to free speech. The government has taken every possible precaution to strike a balance in drawing up the new definition between protecting fundamental rights and safeguarding citizens. Our definition draws on the work of Dame Sarah Khan, the government's independent reviewer of social cohesion, and Sir Mark Rowley, the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, before his appointment to that post. The proposed definition will hold that extremism is the promotion or advancement of an ideology based on violence, hatred or intolerance that aims to negate or destroy the fundamental rights and freedoms of others, or undermine, overturn or replace the UK's system of liberal parliamentary democracy and democratic rights, or intentionally create a permissive environment for others to achieve these results. It is important to stress that we are in no way intending to restrict freedom of expression, religion or belief. But the government cannot be in a position where, unwittingly or not, we sponsor, subsidise or support in any way organisations and individuals opposed to the freedoms we hold dear. Across this House, I am sure that we would agree that organisations such as the British National Socialist Movement and Patriotic Alternative, who promote neo-Nazi ideology, argue for forced repatriation, a white ethno-state and the targeting of minority groups for intimidation, are precisely the type of groups about which we should be concerned and whose activities we will assess against the new definition. The activities of the extreme right wing are a growing worry. The targeting of both Muslim and Jewish communities and individuals by these groups is a profound concern requiring concerted action. And it is important, just as with our definition of extremism, to be precise in the use of language when discussing Islamism. Islamism should never be confused with Islam. Islam is a great faith, a religion of peace, which provides spiritual nourishment to millions, inspires countless acts of charity, and celebrates virtues of generosity, compassion, and kindness. Islamism is a totalitarian ideology which seeks to divide, calls for the establishment of an Islamic state governed by Sharia law, and seeks the overthrow of liberal democratic principles. It has its roots in the thinking of the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood, Hassan al-Banna, the founder of Jamaat-e-Islami, Abu al-Maududi, and the Muslim Brotherhood ideologue, Said Qutb. The Palestinian branch of the Muslim Brotherhood is, of course, Hamas. Organisations such as the Muslim Association of Britain, which is the British affiliate of the Muslim Brotherhood, and other groups such as Cage and MEND, give rise to concern for their Islamist orientation and views. We will be holding these and other organisations to account to assess if they meet our definition of extremism, and will take action as appropriate. There are, of course, further steps that we will take in the coming days and weeks to marginalise extremist groups and to support and strengthen those communities where extremists are most active and spreading division. This will include responding to Dame Sarah Khan's forthcoming report on social cohesion and democratic resilience, and Lord Walney's independent review of how to counter political violence and disruption. In this debate, we must never forget about the experiences of victims of extremism who are targeted by extremist groups and the severe and distressing impact it has on their lives. So I'm pleased that Dame Sarah Khan will be addressing this in her forthcoming report. As the Prime Minister has said, the time has come for us all to stand together to combat the forces of division and to beat this poison. The liberties that we hold dear, and indeed the democratic principles we're all sent here to uphold, require us to counter and challenge the extremists who seek to intimidate, to coerce, and to divide. We have to be clear-eyed about the threat we face, precise about where that threat comes from, and rigorous in defending our democracy. That means upholding freedom of expression, religion, and belief when they are threatened, facing down harassment and hate, supporting the communities facing the greatest challenge from extremist activity, and ensuring this House and this country are safe, free and united. I commend this statement to the House.
I now call the Shadow Secretary of State, Angela Rayner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I start by thanking the Secretary of State for advance sight of this statement and for his briefing yesterday. Hateful extremism threatens the safety of our communities and the unity of our country. Everyone across this House can agree that this is a serious problem which demands a serious response. So I want to begin by saying from the outset, when it comes to our national security, when it comes to the threat of radicalisation, when it comes to the toxic scourge of Islamophobia, neo-Nazism, anti-Semitism or any other corrosive hatred, the whole House can and should work together. The way the government does this work matters, and the language that we all use is important. And I want to welcome the Secretary of State's opening words that it's our diversity and our values which make our country stronger. Indeed, the Secretary of State is right to raise the concerns about the dangers facing our elected representatives. We must be free to represent the views of our constituents. We all have a responsibility to work to extinguish the flames of division and never to fan them. While it may be part of the nature of our politics for passion to sometimes take centre stage, and while we may challenge and probe these plans today, if the Secretary of State wants to engage going forward, he has my word that we can do so in good faith. And the reason that I say challenge is because I do believe he's made a mistake in the way that this policy has been trailed in the last week. So I'm glad that he's now come to the House to give clarification. But it is not right that we have spent the last few days poring over a possible new definition in the papers. And it's not right that the department has leaked the names of groups that may or may not be covered by this definition when he rightly says this work should be based on due diligence. And it is not right that each stage of the recruitment of a new Islamophobia advisor has been mired in controversy. So can the Secretary of State confirm he has now appointed an advisor? So on today's announcement, Mr. Speaker, we will scrutinise this new definition, and it will be crucial to see the way it is applied in practice. But can I ask the Secretary of State to set out today how the new Centre of Excellence will operate and how it will be resourced? And can he confirm how this new definition will work in practice? How exactly will it restrict the government's engagement? And can he explain whether these restrictions will only relate to government engagement or later extended to other public bodies such as the police and universities? Given this new definition, the public will rightly be alarmed at the idea that government ministers could already have met with extremist groups. Can the Secretary of State shed some light on this? Renewed vigilance and diligence is welcome, particularly in the current climate, but if his own department now needs to cut ties with extremist groups, it begs the question why they were working with them in the first place. And given he says this will not affect gender-critical campaigners, those with conservative religious beliefs, trans activists, environmental protest groups, or those exercising their proper right to free speech, can the Secretary of State explain which groups this new definition will affect and where the government has chosen to draw the line? Mr. Speaker, this is not the first time that the government has identified this risk or promised to act. As the Secretary of State mentions in his opening, at the beginning of 2011, well back then, the Conservative Home Secretary told the House that if organisations do not support the values of democracy, human rights, equality before law, participation in society, we will not work with them and we will not fund them. It begs the question, why has it taken the government 13 years to address this? The Secretary of State says that organisations which are clearly extreme have benefited from government engagement, endorsement and support, and even suggests that those groups have exploited government engagement. Can he understand how deeply concerning this is to hear? He must explain exactly how this has been allowed to happen. Mr. Speaker, we know that there has been a huge surge in online extremism, And can the Secretary of State give assurance on how this will be dealt with? What action he is taking to work cross-government to assess and confront online hate? We know that extremism doesn't exist in a vacuum, and we need political leadership on this. But a quality of good leadership is to empower others. The Secretary of State says that the department has been working with faith groups, civil society and local councils, and I agree that they all have a crucial role to play in tackling extremism. But what form has that consultation taken, and will he publish the findings of that consultation? And on the wider work now needed, can the Secretary of State set out if this work will be underpinned by a new cross-government counter-extremism strategy, given the last one is now 9 years out of date? Will it include action to rebuild the resilience and cohesion of our communities? And he mentions new funding. How much will that funding be, and how will it be allocated? And how will it interact with other funding streams, including the multi-faith dialogue? Mr. Speaker, I also want to raise the point about hate crime and how important this is to tackling extremism. We have seen an appalling surge of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia in recent months, and the previous strategy is now 4 years out of date. Can I ask the Secretary of State, when will he have an updated hate crime action plan? And have ministers abandoned plans to bring forward a new hate crime strategy? And can I ask the Minister, why is the anti-Muslim hatred working group and the anti-Semitism working group no longer meeting? We need much stronger action to tackle the corrosive forms of hatred that devastate lives and corrode communities. But today's statement does not go far enough. And regardless of how workable and effective this new definition and centre of excellence is, this announcement will not be enough. I want to finish by echoing the words of the Archbishops of Canterbury and York and their warnings that against the backdrop of growing divisions, it's for political leaders to provide a conciliatory tone and to pursue policies that bring us together, not risk dividing us apart. I look forward to working with the Secretary of State on this.
Secretary of State.
Well, I'm very grateful to the Shadow Secretary of State for the constructive, detailed and consensual approach that she's taking to what are inevitably challenging and difficult issues. I enjoyed the opportunity to talk to her and other Labour colleagues yesterday. I look forward to working together in the future, and I know it is the role of the opposition to challenge, and the constructive way in which challenge has been issued today is something which I wholeheartedly welcome. Can I also say that I agree with the Shadow Secretary of State that the danger to elected representatives is growing, and it is something which my right honourable friend, the Security Minister, has invested time, care and money to counter. And can I also say, of course, passion, vigour, determination is part of the meat of our politics, and nothing in anything that we have said today should take away from our desire to see free speech exercised as energetically as possible. The Shadow Secretary of State mentioned the leaking of some information relating to our work on this. I deprecate that leaking. It is fundamentally a challenge to the effective operation of government, and a leak inquiry has been commissioned in order to see how some of the information about our statement today was shared. But, Mr. Speaker, there is an opportunity for all of us, as a result of our having given the statement, to scrutinise the detail. The Shadow Secretary of State talks about the Centre of Excellence, how it will be staffed, how it will be funded. Impartial civil servants with training in this area will be supplemented in their work by studies by academics and academic bodies, and of course we will work with the existing expertise in the Homeland Security Analysis and Intelligence Unit within the Home Office in order to ensure that all our work is rigorous. And we will make sure that if a decision is made to list an organisation as extremist, that we will show our working, as it were, that the evidence which leads us to that conclusion and the judgment that we have made will be there for everyone to see. The Shadow Secretary of State asked, of course, why it was the case that in the past, government or arms of the state had unwittingly involved themselves or been engaged with extremist organisations. It's because the definition, while well-intentioned and drawn up with care, was perhaps insufficiently precise and perhaps insufficiently policed, that we thought it was appropriate to update that definition. And this follows on, of course, from the Shakil Beg case, from William Shawcross's independent review of Prevent, and other examples that were brought to government's attention. And I think the real sin would be having been told by independent figures, by the courts, and by William Shawcross that we needed to look again at our approach. The real sin, I think, would have been not to, and to have stuck to a course which had led to mistakes in the past. And of course, the Shadow Secretary of State asks about wider work on resilience. We'll be publishing a more detailed action plan which will include funding commitments to support organisations on the ground which do build up a greater degree of community resilience, and I look forward to working with her and others in local government to achieve that valuable end.
Fire of the House, Sir Peter Bottom.
Well, there we go. We were listening to Michael Gove, and before him, Angela Rayner set out this new definition of extremism. We heard the Levelling Up Secretary, Michael Gove, name several organisations that will be being looked at by a new Centre for Excellence within his department. They will set out which organisations do not get to interact with government, do not get the endorsement or indeed the funds of government. Some of the organisations that he listed that could end up on this list include the Muslim Brotherhood and its affiliates, Cage, Mend, these groups that are known to be perhaps sympathetic to aims and values of Islamism. But also he mentioned the Patriotic Alternative, a far-right group.
Yes, and the British National Socialist movement. So Michael Gove tried to make very clear, at least in his mind, that this will not suppress freedom of speech, and this is actually about upholding freedom of speech and democracy in this country. So that's what he had to say. Angela Rayner questioned him on some of the detail on that. She also spoke about whether they've appointed an Islamophobia advisor yet, after one name was leaked to the press and then he pulled out.
Did he?
He didn't answer that one. No, he did not.
I thought Angela Rayner seemed like she's sort of had the fire taken out of her belly there. Of course, she hasn't been appearing in the media for the last, I think it's 42 days now, ever since the scandal over whether or not she paid tax for a second property that she owned. That big question has sort of perhaps been dogging her a little, and I thought normally she's much more vigorous than we heard her today.
Perhaps this isn't her area of expertise.
Well, she's
it's that. Maybe
she's the Shadow Minister.
She is indeed, but it covers a whole lot of different policy areas, doesn't it?
I've heard a lot. I was at the Trade Union Congress in September, where Angela Rayner gave the keynote speech, and she brought the house down. She was passionate. She was shouting. She can be an amazing public speaker. But what we saw there in the House of Commons was a diminished Angela Rayner.
Yes, it did amuse me when she said, let's not fan the flames of division in the Houses of Commons or whatever. And, of course, Angela Rayner usually doesn't hold back when it comes to that sort of thing.
Do you think she's had a talking to by
Maybe.
Sir Keir Starmer?
I think so.
Do you think we're in an election year, she's been told, oh, don't be too passionate, Angela?
Calm down. I don't know, maybe.
Ooh.
Well, you can't say that.
Well, maybe someone in the senior Labour leader's opposition office has said, calm down, dear. That was a scandal from the last
One thing
decade.
also to note is that he did make clear that the definition will not affect TERFs or gender-critical women. It won't affect environmental protesters, and it won't affect... There was one other group they said that it won't affect.
Trans activists.
Trans activists too. So you are still allowed to protest. Should we get the thoughts of our political editor, Christopher Hope? Christopher, do you think Michael Gove gave us enough detail? Do we know exactly what this definition will be and how it will affect?
Yeah, we know what the definition is, don't we? I mean, I think what I was struck by was he named those groups on the right of political campaigning or even society: Patriotic Alternative, the British National Socialist Movement, neo-Nazi group. Amongst on the left, I suppose you could say it, the Muslim Association of Britain, Cage and Men. There are 5 groups he named there in Parliament, of course, with full privilege allowing him to say that. They'll be looked at under the new extremism definition, and they'll be assessed whether they should face, they should call extremists, and then they can't get money from central government. Some of those groups have received charitable funding, and that's part of the problem. And it may mean that when you're named as, and we'll see more in the detail, but when you're named as an extremist group, you then can't receive charitable funding, and that could be a way of squeezing the money going to them. Those are perhaps more the less controversial names he mentioned. When this list is published, I think in a few weeks' time, it will be deeply controversial. There'll be some names around the edges which some people might look at that and go, well, why are they called extremists? Why is the government restricting the right of freedom of speech involving those people? And is that right? And is this a thin end of the wedge? And what safeguards are there to stop a future government tightening the ratchet on freedom of speech in this country? Those are the issues I think will be played out in the next few weeks.
I think a lot of people will feel that it's incredible that public money has been going to some of these groups that have been mentioned here. We know that, for example, Cage, the research director of that group, called Jihadi John a beautiful young man some years ago. This group has still been welcomed into civic society. And we heard the case study that Michael Gove went into some detail of the Lewisham Islamic Centre, which had been going into schools. Been going into state schools in Lewisham, saying that Islamic violence is legitimate.
And that's right. I think what the government's trying to do is to recognise the concern that this definition from 2011 hasn't really captured these other groups, other people who are saying this kind of thing, and they are attracting public money. Now, I don't think yet charities are banned from supporting those, but certainly if a group is called an extremist by central government, that will make the trustees of charities very nervous about giving that group money and make it hard to justify. By the way, you both mentioned Angela Rayner. She may be looking a bit pensive because she's about to do what's called a press gallery lunch in Westminster, Tom and Emily.
Yeah.
And that means she'll make a speech, but she'll make half an hour of questions by about 50 journalists, and that won't be easy, given she's barely appeared in public since the question marks about her second home appeared in the Mail on Sunday about 4 weeks ago.
That's a very good point, Christopher. Yes, we'll be looking forward to that a little later on in the show.
Our very own Catherine Foster is going to that lunch, and we'll be speaking to her later in the programme. But Chris, yes.
I was going to say, forgive me, that we are across GB News, and my colleague Catherine Forster is getting a nice lunch for her, but she'll be back with the hot takes from that as soon as she can get her pudding downer.
And it is fascinating because this story has been going on for some time. It was uncovered in the Mail on Sunday first, I believe, which is that there has been a big question mark over thousands of pounds in tax that Angela Rayner has allegedly not paid. Do you think, Chris, that basically all the questions here are going to be for Angela Rayner on this scandal that seems to be quite suppressed in a lot of the media?
Well, it's been covered in what you might call the right of centre papers. I mean, the story originally emerged from a forthcoming biography by Michael Ashcroft, Lord Ashcroft, the former Tory party donor. At some point, he was a treasurer, deputy chairman back in the day. So Labour originally dismissed this story as muckraking by a Conservative. But I think that the public record does support some of what he's been saying. And I think she's got to explain that when that house was sold many years ago, was capital gains tax due on it? And if so, was it paid? And if not, why not? I mean, I think the numbers we're talking about, Tom and Emily, are quite low. I don't think if there were a capital gain, it's quite a small gain. But was that paid and was it not paid? I mean, this is the kind of scrutiny, I think, which all Labour politicians are going to get as we go forward into an election. The polls suggest they are going to win a majority. And you will find journalists going back over the high-profile ministers or shadow ministers and see what's in their past. And that's all part of the way that we weigh up the character and whether the Labour Party and its leaders are fit for government. And that's why she's getting this scrutiny. And hopefully we'll hear more from her today about that.
Yes, when the story came to light, it was sort of passed off, wasn't it, between the different press offices, between Angela Rayner's office, between the Labour Party press office. She'll have to very much answer the questions perhaps in a little more detail this afternoon, but we'll keep you up to date with Catherine Forster going to it. Thank you very much, Christopher Hope, our political editor there in Westminster.
Well, coming up, we're going to get reaction from a prominent Conservative Member of Parliament on all of this. And what does this mean for people at home? Could you be labelled an extremist? But before all of that, it's your headlines with Sam.
Tom, Emily, thanks very much. It's just gone 12:30. I'm Sam Francis in the GB newsroom, and we start with a recap of that news that Tom and Emily have been covering, that Michael Gove has outlined a new definition of extremism, which he says will mean the government can express more clearly than ever which groups pose a risk to Britain's security. Delivering that statement in the Commons just moments ago, the Communities Secretary said that the new definition is more precise and rigorous than the previous one. It's intended to be used to assess whether extremist groups should be blocked from public funding. Mr Gove said it will make vital frontline anti-radicalisation work in communities more effective.
We have to be clear-eyed about the threat we face, precise about where that threat comes from, and rigorous in defending our democracy. That means upholding freedom of expression, religion and belief when they are threatened, facing down harassment and hate, supporting the communities facing the greatest challenge from extremist activity, and ensuring this House and this country are safe, free and united.
Well, Michael Gove insisted that the new definition will not affect people's proper right to free speech. Deputy Labour leader Angela Rayner said that it was important that elected representatives worked together to tackle the issue.
When it comes to our national security, when it comes to the threat of radicalisation, when it comes to the toxic scourge of Islamophobia, neo-Nazism, anti-Semitism or any other corrosive hatred, the whole House can and should work together.
And finally, to some royal news. The Prince of Wales and Duke of Sussex are set to attend an awards ceremony in honour of their late mother, Princess Diana. Prince William will make an appearance in person at the Diana Legacy Awards this evening. However, it's reported the brothers won't cross paths, with Prince Harry joining via video call only after William has left the ceremony. Meanwhile, the Princess of Wales, Kate Middleton, has been crowned Britain's favourite royal in a survey conducted before the recent photo editing controversy. Those are the headlines. Plenty more to come throughout the afternoon. And in the meantime, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to our website, gbnews.com/alerts.
Mark Dolan Tonight. Weekends from 9 p.m.
I've personally been very torn on whether Prince Harry should have full police protection when he's in the United Kingdom. On the one hand, why should taxpayers fork out for somebody that's left the country and the institution? He is no longer a working, serving royal. But I don't think it matters. He is one of the most famous men in the world, and whether he's a royal or not, he is an ambassador for this country. And he still does good. Charitable causes, the Invictus Games, and he is still a nice and charming guy with a heart. And whilst he has left the royal family and departed these shores, he was and remains the son of King Charles. That is a biological fact. Well, let's hope so. And it wasn't his choice to be born into royalty. It wasn't his choice to be the son of the king. And for that reason, I think he should have equal police protection to his brother William when he is in this country. He couldn't be a more high-profile figure, and unfortunately, like all the royals, Harry will be a target for some very bad people. I fear that if, God forbid, anything happened to him or his family, the authorities would have blood on their hands. So, it's not often that I back Prince Harry, but on this one, he has my support. Look what happened to his poor mum, killed in a Paris tunnel in the 1990s with an allegedly drunk chauffeur. A top royal security insider recently told me that Diana would still be with us today if she had had top royal protection at that time. So let's not make the same mistake twice. Prince Harry needs full protection and the best we've got. Yes, he might be a numpty, but he's our numpty.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion, Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 37 minutes past 12.
There we go.
Got that right in the end. And this afternoon in the House of Commons, Michael Gove has named a number of organisations that could end up on the British list of extremists. These would be people precluded from interacting with government or indeed accepting public money. They include the Muslim Brotherhood, Cage, MEND, Patriotic Alternative and the British National Socialist Group.
Yes, they do indeed. So shall we speak to Conservative MP Sir Michael Fabricant, who is waiting on the line. Michael, thank you very much indeed for joining us. You were listening to Michael Gove there and Angela Rayner's response. So, Michael Gove insisted very strongly that this would have no impact on freedom of speech. He did go as far as to name and shame, I think it's about 8 groups, those on the far right, and Islamist groups too, or those that may have extremists within them. Groups of concern, I think he called them. Do you think it's true that freedom of speech won't be impacted at all? We've heard from a number of groups that they're very concerned.
Well, the freedom of speech to preach hate will certainly be affected, and quite rightly so. Look, this is a very, very delicate matter, and government after government of all political shades have failed to tackle it. It's like, if you like, the grooming gangs in Rochdale, which is a different issue. But, you know, there the police didn't want to tackle it for fear of upsetting certain groups or being accused of being racist. But it does need to be tackled. We've seen an increased amount of anti-Semitism in the country and Islamophobia too. And this issue does need to be addressed. And at last, a government minister is addressing it, so I welcomed what he had to say. But I will say this, although Angela Rayner did support the generality of it all, I'm pretty sure that from what she was saying, that when it comes to actual organisations being prescribed or being named by the government to not receive funding, we'll see a howl of outrage from the Labour Party, because that's invariably what happens.
It's interesting. Angela Rayner didn't necessarily... She sort of sidestepped the issue of naming these groups. She criticised the process, criticised the leaking, criticised how it had been discussed in the newspapers. When it came to the announcement, she studiously avoided being critical or landing one side of the fence or the other side of the fence on the actuality of it. But some of these groups, Michael Fabricant, have come out today and said, or at least a coalition of Muslim groups, has said that this is a solution looking for a problem that doesn't exist. There's already a lot of denial about the problem of extremism.
Yes, well, they would do, wouldn't they? Particularly some groups who have been preaching hate. And it's been remarkable. We heard an example of how in Lewisham, you know, the council has been supporting a group which has been going into schools and preaching hate and division, not just against Jews, but also against other Muslims who are not of the same Muslim sect as they are. And what was made very clear by Michael Gove is that if any organisation is listed, then they will publish in great detail the reasons why. It's something, you know, in this country we've steered clear from for so many years, hoping things would get better. Sadly, they've got worse. And at long last, we're anticipating that we need to do something. And about time too, I say.
There wasn't really talk of any specific sanctions other than not receiving public money or being involved with the government in any way. Is this guidance, what exactly is this guidance there to do? Because the government presumably shouldn't be working with these types of organisations anyway. It seems, is this just to spur a debate rather than to actually lead to any substantial crackdown?
Well, I can understand you're thinking that, but look, it's not just government, it's local government as well. And we've seen local government involved with some incredibly shady organisations. So someone's got to get a grip of it, and this is exactly what Michael Gove is trying to achieve. It's not going to be easy. It's something that we've not done before. Look, if it turns out that they've actually broken the law, then the full weight of the law will come down on them. But what the difficulty has been is that those who are just inside the law, yet by preaching hate, could lead indirectly to various people and organizations actually breaking the law and committing acts of terror in this country. And that's completely unacceptable. And because it's so delicate, because it's so sensitive, government after government, as I said earlier, has avoided tackling this issue. So I'm very pleased now that Michael Gove and the government is going to tackle this issue. But you can bet your bottom dollar we'll see objections in the detail from Angela Rayner, but we'll also see some organisations, and they've already said this, going to judicial review and arguing in the court why they think possibly that the government is being unfair for detailing them.
Michael, Angela did raise something else which perhaps has caused a little bit of embarrassment for the government. The issue of this Islamophobia advisor, anti-Muslim hatred advisor. There was a name leaked to the press. And leaked to us. Well, leaked to us, yes, leaked to GBNews. And then he came out pretty quickly saying, actually, well, quitting the role before he'd even started. Is there anyone waiting in the wings to take this job? He complained that it wasn't very well paid.
Well, believe me, I think everybody who's in government service will argue they're not very well paid. But I haven't. I just don't know. Actually, I'm not in the department, and you're going to have to ask Michael Gove that one.
Michael Fabricant, another story that's in the press today are the rumours. The growing rumours of vultures circling around Rishi Sunak. Supposedly, we learned that cabinet ministers have been meeting to see what could be done and perhaps face the extraordinary position of a sixth Prime Minister, a sixth Conservative Prime Minister since 2016.
Well, cabinet ministers are always speaking to each other about different things. I mean, that goes on all the time. It's the nature, actually, of the House of Commons, and MPs get invited to meetings with cabinet ministers and all the rest of it. Of course, they'll be sort of talking about, well, how can we improve our election chances? But as you say, Tom, it would be absolutely extraordinary, if not mad, if we were now to replace one prime minister with another. I mean, I often see on social media people saying, bring back Boris, and I'm a great Boris fan. But, you know, you can't have someone who's not a member of parliament becoming prime minister unless you do something like the 18th century where you had lords who were prime minister. I don't think that's going to happen somehow.
Although, Michael Fabricant, when Alec Douglas-Home became Prime Minister, he was originally a member of the House of Lords. He had to become a member of Parliament in order to take Prime Minister's questions and all the rest of it. There were a few days when technically he was a member of neither House and was technically Prime Minister without having a seat in either the Commons or the Lords.
There's hope for you.
Well, I can tell that Tom has done a good political degree at Durham University, with a first, remembering all that, and it's true. But I don't think that's going to happen again. And look, Alec Douglas-Home is one of the shortest-serving prime ministers there was, and it brought in a Labour government, so I don't think that's a good idea.
Well, I'm glad we got in the trivia, but yes, I completely take your point. The last proper prime minister from the Lords was Victorian. It was Salisbury, I think. So that was a long time ago. I think we probably have moved on. Michael Fabricant, thank you very much for joining us here on Good Afternoon Britain.
Yes, thank you, Michael. I seem to think that perhaps there are these types of conversations going on, but nothing too much to bother about.
Well, when you're 20 points in the polls,
you're going to talk about it, aren't you?
When you're even lower than that, I suppose, yes, things sound ridiculous. It sounds mad to have a sixth Prime Minister, but it also sounds mad looking at some of the polls to
lose that many seats.
That take you below 100 seats even.
Well, we've got plenty more to bring you in the reaction to Michael Gove's big announcement there on extremism next. Don't go anywhere.
Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Most of us will see a bit of rain today, but across eastern England, it may well stay mostly dry, and that's where we'll see some pretty high temperatures as well. Low pressure, though, is still controlling our weather, and these two weather fronts are moving across the country, both providing some outbreaks of rain, persistent rain through central and southern Scotland. Soggy old afternoon here, bit of snow likely on the tops of the hills, but much of the Highlands, the Northern Isles, will stay dry and bright. And mostly dry across East Anglia and the southeast, although we will see lots more cloud coming in. But showery rain for Wales and southwest England. Look at the temperature there for England and Wales. Very mild, 16 with a bit of brightness. We could reach 17 Celsius. Feeling cold, though, with that persistent rain over the central belt of Scotland. That rain does linger through much of tonight as well. More showers to come for Northern Ireland. There'll be some showery rain for England and Wales. And then through the second half of the night, we'll see some heavier rain coming into Wales and the far southwest. May have the odd rumble of thunder mixed in with that. Another pretty mild night, certainly for England and Wales. A bit of a chilly one in the far north of Scotland, where the winds are coming in from the north. Still providing a bit of snow over the tops of the hills. Another fairly damp day for Scotland. Some heavy showery rain along the M4 and the M25 early on Friday. That'll clear away, and then we're left with a mixture of bright or sunny spells, but plenty of showers to come as well. Again, fairly mild across England and Wales, though it will be breezier. Another pretty chilly one in Scotland.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's coming up to 10 to 1, and let's dive in further with what it means to be an extremist in Britain and how extremist groups might be affected from this day on. We're joined with political commentator Peter Spencer. And Peter, I know you've been listening to what Michael Gove had to say. He will be referring now some named groups to his own department for potential addition to this list. What happens then?
They crack on with it little by little, but I do find as an overarching perspective on all this, I very much take the point made by Sir Michael Fabricant, and Mickey Fab, we used to call him back in the day, but letting that he said, look, it's very delicate and it's very sensitive. And indeed, so it is. There has been a sharp uptick in anti-Semitic incidents since October the 7th, and indeed a sharper rise in Islamophobic instances. Couple that with the fact that there is a very clear and present danger to the lives of a significant slice of members of Parliament. So this is not a thing to be messed around with, which is why I think that Michael Gove has very sensibly some say it's gone too far, some say it hasn't gone far enough, which suggests to me is getting it sort of more or less about right. And as for Rachel Reeves' performance, I mean, there's been a great deal of talk about, scandals surrounding her and all that. I just think what's happened here is that she is determined also to keep the tempo down because it's too serious for messing around with. I mean, it's not every day you see an outburst of common sense in the Palace of Westminster. Indeed, it has the charm of novelty, but I think that's what we're looking at there.
And how much cut-through do you think this all has with the public? Do you imagine that there will be overwhelming support for this type of conversation, for redefining the definition of extremism, for naming and shaming these groups in the House of Commons? How much do you think the general public will look at this and think, well, the Conservatives, they're getting a grip on it?
I think there'll be a certain amount of interest, but I don't think it'll really get people going, except those who are possibly on the receiving end or indeed the giving end of extremist behaviour. I think far more cut-through comes from the complete and utter shambles that the Conservative Party seems to be in over so many other aspects of what it's trying to do, notably what Rishi Sunak is trying and failing to do.
Yes, it's interesting, Peter, you mention perhaps the unique level-headedness of the discussion we saw in the House of Commons. It stands in contrast to the chaos we're seeing, frankly, in so many other areas of government policy. And that brings me on to a question, which we've seen raised in the press today, this morning, about cabinet ministers supposedly having quiet conversations in nooks and crannies, in corners of the corridors of power, about potentially removing the Prime Minister.
Yes, and I'm sure these conversations are going on, and I'm sure they've been going on for some time. An awful lot of it is just chatter, but the thing has been brought, I think, into even sharper focus in recent days with the huge controversy over the Conservative Party donor Frank Hester and the £10 million, well, first of all, the hateful and grotesque things that he appears to have said about Diane Abbott, and indeed the £10 million that he has given to the Conservative Party, which Sunak is under a great deal of pressure to give back. Now, I think what we have here is the problem of the fact that Rishi Sunak has only been an MP for under 10 years, and his background is finance, it's not in politics, and he made a pretty good fist, to my mind, of the Exchequer when he was the Chancellor there. Remember when he was Dishy Rishi and sorting out the furlough scheme. But now that he's in number 10, he's moved next door, I think his basic shortcoming is he's not all that good at politics, which is... Yeah? I mean, shall I continue, or do you want to ask me another question?
No, I was just basically what you were getting onto. Does he have the personality? Does he have the authority to be a good Prime Minister if his cabinet ministers are having all these hush-hush conversations about ousting him?
Well, I mean, I think there's no question his authority is bleeding away pretty much by the day, and there is that sense that he doesn't really know what he's doing when it comes to making these political judgments. And when I would draw an analogy with a young lad that's just passed his driving test and he's shooting around and skidding around when it's just been raining and stuff, and boring adults say, listen, if you had a bit more experience, you wouldn't do that. And, you know, it's not a matter of calibrating the risk, it's just a matter of having something like a sixth sense about it. And so let us look at specifically the Frank Hester example, where Rishi Sunak said, well,
Peter, I'm afraid we're not going to have time to go into the example, but really appreciate your time here. We're running up to the end of the hour, but next hour we will be hearing from the Prime Minister himself. Don't go anywhere.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Most of us will see a bit of rain today, but across eastern England, it may well stay mostly dry, and that's where we'll see some pretty high temperatures as well. Low pressure, though, is still controlling our weather, and these two weather fronts are moving across the country, both providing some outbreaks of rain, persistent rain through central and southern Scotland. Soggy old afternoon here, bit of snow likely on the tops of the hills, but much of the Highlands, the Northern Isles, will stay dry and bright. And mostly dry across East Anglia and the southeast, although we will see lots more cloud coming in. But showery rain for Wales and southwest England. Look at the temperature there for England and Wales. Very mild, 16 with a bit of brightness. We could reach 17 Celsius. Feeling cold, though, with that persistent rain over the central belt of Scotland. That rain does linger through much of tonight as well. More showers to come for Northern Ireland. There'll be some showery rain for England and Wales. And then through the second half of the night, we'll see some heavier rain coming into Wales and the far southwest. And may have the odd rumble of thunder mixed in with that. Another pretty mild night, certainly for England and Wales. A bit of a chilly one in the far north of Scotland, where the winds are coming in from the north. Still providing a bit of snow over the tops of the hills. Another fairly damp day for Scotland. Some heavy showery rain along the M4 and the M25 early on Friday. That'll clear away, and then we're left with a mixture of bright or sunny spells, but plenty of showers to come as well. Again, fairly mild across England and Wales, though it will be breezier. Another pretty chilly one in Scotland.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We've got cash, treats and a spring shopping spree to be won in a great British giveaway. You could win an amazing £12,345 in tax-free cash. Plus, there's a further £500 of shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. We'll also give you a gadget package to use in your garden this spring. That includes a games console, a pizza oven and a portable smart speaker, so you can listen to GB News on the go. For another chance to win the vouchers, the treats and £12,345 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB03 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday the 29th of March. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if watching or listening on demand. Good luck.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise
and who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 1 o'clock. You're watching and listening to Good Afternoon Britain. Now let's get straight to it. Shall we hear from the Prime Minister? He's been speaking the last few minutes.
What he said was wrong and racist. I've made that clear, and it's right that he's apologised for that, and where remorse is shown, I think that should be accepted.
But if money hasn't been spent, will you return?
I said on the Nation, I said what I've said. When someone has expressed genuine remorse and contrition for what they've done, which is he has, it's the right thing to do to accept that. And the comments, as I said, were wrong. They were racist. It's right that he's now apologised for them.
Do you think that suggesting an MP should be shot is extremism?
Well, the extremist strategy will be outlined in a couple of hours in Parliament, and it's right that we wait for the Community Secretary to do that. But what I said on the steps of Downing Street a few weeks ago, that there has been a worrying rise in extremist activity, which is seeking to undermine our democracy, our values, and stir division. And it's important that government has the tools that it needs to protect against that threat. That's what the strategy is about, and the Community Secretary will be outlining further details in Parliament later today.
But suggesting an MP should be shot, is that extremism?
As I said, the Community Secretary will be outlining the strategy broadly in Parliament today.
Yeah, but do you have a view on that?
Well, it's important that these things are done in a objective and considered manner, evidence-based. The Community Secretary will be outlining details of how this will work, and this is about organisations that the government engages with and making sure that those organisations are not ones that we would consider to be, as I said, not supporting British values, undermining our democracy. There will be an objective set of things that will be worked through to come to those deliberations. The Community Secretary will outline those details in Parliament. It wouldn't be right for me to talk about it in advance of that.
So you'll be putting out this definition, but there won't be any statutory powers, and the police won't use it. So what's the point?
As I said at the steps of Downing Street a few weeks ago, there has been a rise in extremist activity that is stirring division, undermining our values and liberal parliamentary democracy. That's not right, and it's important that government has the tools that it needs to protect us against that. That's what the strategy will outline. But again, it hasn't been outlined yet. That will happen rightly in Parliament later, and it wouldn't be right for me to speculate on that before it happens.
But there won't be any statutory powers, am I right in saying?
As I said, the Community Secretary will be outlining this in Parliament in a few hours' time. It wouldn't be appropriate for me to talk about it in advance of that.
In your estimation, what is the biggest extremist threat to this country at the moment?
As I said from the steps of Downing Street, we've seen different groups try and undermine our parliamentary democracy, stir division and hate. What the Community Secretary will set out later is making sure that government has the tools that it needs to deal with those threats and make sure government is not engaging with organisations that are threatening the things that we hold dear. But as I said, Community Secretary is making those announcements in Parliament. It would be right to wait for that.
Finally, you're here campaigning with an MP in what is a key target seat, used to be a Labour seat. Will there be a general election anytime soon? Will you rule out a May election?
Well, I said at the start of this year my working assumption was we'd have an election in the second half of this year, and nothing has changed since I said that. And what Richard is doing here in Gloucester is a fantastic job. Actually, I'm here visiting the rugby club, which is doing an incredible job in the community. It's nice to be able to say well done to them for that, but also wish them luck for their game tomorrow. But more generally, talk to people across Gloucestershire and the country about the recent budget. And if we stick to our plan, we'll be able to give pensioners a £900 increase in the state pension in a few weeks' time, but also cut taxes for people with our Nix cut worth £900 as well, making progress towards our goal of ending the double taxation on work, which is unfair, and ensuring a brighter future for everyone. And in contrast, we've now seen that Labour is opposed to that tax cut, which means higher taxes for people, less money in their pockets. That's the opposite of what we want to do. And if we stick to the plan, £900 increase for pensioners and a £900 tax cut for everyone in work.
Final question. Andrea Jenkins, one of your MPs on the radio this morning, she'd like to see you replaced. Your party isn't very united, is it?
I said I think actually the party is united in wanting to make sure that we don't have the Labour government, because our plan is the right one for the country. And actually, we've been through a difficult couple of years. Of course, that's the case, whether it's with COVID, recovering from that, the impact of the war in Ukraine. But at the start of this year, we really have turned a corner, and we're now pointing in the right direction. You can see that most clearly with the economy. Inflation down from 11% to 4%, mortgage rates falling, energy bills falling, but up to almost £250 in a few weeks' time. Wages have been rising, and because of all of that, and because of our plan that is working, we'll be able to increase the state pension by £900 in a few weeks' time and cut taxes by £900 for millions of people, helping to alleviate the unfairness of the double taxation on work. That's our plan. Labour are opposed to it, and that's the contrast at the next election.
Well, there you go. Rishi Sunak taking a few questions from Gloucester Rugby Club, which is nice. He was pushed quite a bit on whether he thinks Frank Hester, the Tory donor, whether his comments were extreme and whether he's an extremist. The Tory donor who said, of course, that Diane Abbott should be shot.
I can just help thinking what a good scrum half he might make. But our political editor, Christopher Hope, has been listening to that conversation and joins us once more. Christopher, what do you make of Rishi Sunak's defence, particularly over this donation? He's sticking by his guns.
Yes, hi, Tom, hi, Emily again. Yeah, he is sticking by his guns. He's trying to move on there. He says that when his remorse has been shown, as it was by Frank Hester, that should be accepted and we move on. That's the line they've adopted since about Wednesday on this story, since the comments from Frank Hester in 2019 were first reported by The Guardian. I was struck that, though, I thought it was quite interesting what we call a pool clip. The guys kept going at him. That doesn't normally happen in these pool clips. We get 3 questions and are out the door. So hats off to the journalist who was asking those questions. I thought when he, sticking to the plan, he kept talking there about the £900 increase in the state pension for pensioners coming in April. That, to me, is good. They're saying that because about 9 days too late, because they allowed the budget to get out the door last Thursday, a week ago, and everyone was saying how pensioners have been crucified by this because they're being caught by the freezing in the tax thresholds. What no one said and should have said on the government side is there is a big increase, this double, I think it's 8% increase in the state pension because of the triple lock coming up at the beginning of April. And clearly that's the new line going forward, is we're going to increase the state pension for pensioners by £900 and cut national insurance for everyone else in work by another £900. There's a nice kind of balance there with those numbers, although they're not the same numbers, but there's a good balance you can see when you describe them. I think they've now got their lines right on that, showing they weren't there 8 days ago.
That's a good point.
It is a fantastic point. You and I, Emily and Gloria De Piero, were all sitting together on listening to that budget and seeing the emails coming into the GB Views inbox where they were saying, what's there for pensioners? What's there for pensioners? But Emily, as we pointed out, they'd announced that earlier.
Yes, why didn't they make a thing of it in the budget?
Yeah. Well, Tom and Emily, the reason, I did say on air with you that there is this big increase from the triple lock coming up in April. The reason why it wasn't mentioned is because it was announced in the November autumn statement, and the convention is that things announced in the November statement are not repeated in the March budget. But that doesn't mean you can't talk about it. And I just don't know why Jeremy Hunt didn't have one paragraph in that speech to say, we've sorted out pensioners last November, and just to remind you, the £900 increase in the state pension in a few weeks' time. Why they didn't say that was an own goal, because it allowed the headlines to race away from them. It is still true that many pensioners are caught by freezing of income tax thresholds if they're paying income tax, but many more benefit from this increase in state pension, and finally they've got their ducks in a row on that line.
Yeah, no, really, really fascinating that they didn't have this as a quick response, or even as sort of literature to put out. I've seen so many graphics online of look what was in the budget, and it's all lots of things for working people, and then all of the responses are, well, what about for the pensioners, for the people that have paid in all their lives? What about for the people that feel like they deserve some? But they are getting £900
Bad comms.
more.
Bad comms, isn't it, Christopher? Should we ask you a little bit about the whole extremism discussion, Michael Gove's speech in the Commons too? Rishi Sunak asked about that more in the context of what Frank Hester said about Diane Abbott. But even so, judging by some of the public feedback we've had from our viewers and listeners, there's still a bit of confusion over exactly what it means to be an extremist. Yes, there were some groups named that they're going to be looking into, but whether there's going to be serious action taken, some people have their doubts.
Yes, I'm looking at my notes to remind myself of the definition. The new definition means if you want to destroy the fundamental rights and freedoms of others, undermine, overturn or replace the UK system of liberal democracy, or create a permissive environment for others to do so, you'll be called an extremist. Those are the three things you must qualify for. So what Michael Gove was saying in the chamber earlier, how they're trying to take that away, it means that you can protest outside an abortion clinic if you want to, or you can go on a march in London if you want to, but you mustn't try to seek to undermine our democratic values. That's certainly what Michael Gove was saying. We heard him list, didn't we, a couple of neo-Nazi groups and 3 Muslim groups as groups that will be looked at. What they're trying to do in the government, I think, is to squeeze the funding for these groups. If you are called extremists, when the new list is published by Michael Gove and James Cleverly in 2 or 3 weeks' time, what that'll mean is that central government can't give you any money. And I think that will mean make it much harder for charities, trustees, to sanction money going to them. Although you probably can do, it's certainly all the trustees do these things. They try and abide charity law. They'll be following best practice. If this group is called an extremist, then I think it'd be quite hard to give money from charities. So they're trying to squeeze the funding, I think, of groups around the margins who have been a bit on the areas which worry the government. Can I just say, by the way, just from that clip earlier, I meant to say to you just then, he did again repeat the line that there's no election. His working assumption is until the second half of the year, and that is quite important because in about 10 days' time is a deadline for the May the 2nd budget, for the May 2nd election. I think next week, the next 10 days, there'll be lots of speculation in the newspapers. We'll be talking about on air on GB News, but it does seem to me that he was definitely turning his face against a May 2nd election there, Tom and Emily.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, really, really
May I just say one thing?
Yes.
May I just say, I think what's going to be one of the most difficult things is getting the civil service, the Home Office, government and everyone involved to agree on whether certain groups are extremists, because people have such different views. So you may take one of these Muslim groups, someone may think absolutely not, they don't have any extremism, everything they say is legitimate. Another person, perhaps in the Home Office or in government, may think the exact reverse. This is why it's so difficult to come up with a succinct definition of extremism, subjective.
Who sits on the Counter-Extremism Centre for Excellence that Michael Gove announced. But in the last few minutes, the Labour Party leader, Sir Keir Starmer, has been talking. He was asked first on Diane Abbott. Let's have a listen.
The comments that have been made about Diane Abbott by the Tory donor Hester are abhorrent. They're racist, they're misogynistic, and the Prime Minister should do the right thing, which is to return the £10 million that he's taken from this individual donor. This is a test for the Prime Minister, and at the moment he is failing that test. There is a separate issue, which is about the investigation into Diane Abbott herself. That's an independent Labour Party process, nothing to do with the leader of the Labour Party. I'm independent of that. That will have to be resolved, but I think it's wrong just to simply conflate the two. Diane Abbott has suffered an incredible amount of abuse over many, many years, and we must support her, but the two issues are separate.
The Ford report said unduly lengthy investigations disproportionately affected black women. After a year-long investigation into an 8-line letter for which Diane Abbott apologised, are you not in danger of allowing these investigations to effectively end her career as a Labour MP?
The Ford report, which I set up, was describing the problems before I became leader of the Labour Party, including what was happening with the complaints procedure. As a result, I completely overhauled the procedure and took the leader of the Labour Party out, so it's an independent process. That's the right change that we've made. I'm glad we've made that change. So the Ford report was describing what happened before I became leader. I've now changed it.
Do you think anything the Tory party has done recently could be counted as extremist?
I think the debate about extremism has to be taken very, very seriously. Because there hasn't really been a review of extremism now for a number of years. There are new threats, and it is important, therefore, that we all come together to look at the question of extremism and what action is now needed. What I would say is that this will only work if it is truly cross-party and not divisive, and that's the spirit in which I want to enter this discussion in relation to extremism.
Unelected officials will be able to decide a group as extremist through a subjective metric. Are you worried about this being abused by this or future governments?
We need to see the full details. We need to see the work of this unit. But do we need to review the situation? Yes, we do. Are there new threats? Yes, there are. But what's most important is that this is truly cross-party. And this will be the test of the government. Are they really reaching out to other parties to make this is something which can go forward as a matter of consensus? Or are they going to try and use this for party political process, point scoring as we go into the election? It has to be the first, and that's the spirit in which I've entered into this work.
Interesting on the question of whether Diane Abbott should have the whip reinstated. Of course, she was suspended for racist comments herself, or what were alleged racist comments.
327 days ago. So
what's been going on there?
Well, apparently some sort of independent investigation, but 327 days for what was, I think it was around 200 words, a 200-word letter to The Guardian, and it's taken the best part of a year to supposedly investigate this. I think perhaps a cynic might suggest there's no investigation at all. Or if there is one, it is being drawn out so very slowly so that the Labour Party can sort of subtly drop Diane Abbott as a candidate without having to make a decision.
I think you might be right on that one, Tom. Does she also praise Chairman Mao? Am I right in thinking?
Oh, sounds like something she'd do.
Yeah.
I don't have the quote before me, but what she was suspended over was saying that Jewish people don't suffer racism in the way that black people suffer racism. She compared anti-Jewish racism to people making fun of ginger people.
And I can safely say, not the same, as a redhead myself. Not the same. Although 100% of gingers have been bullied at least once in their lives.
No, it's a really,
very serious face when I talk about it.
But also, only a ginger can call another ginger ginger.
Oh, well, there you go. Redhead, strawberry blonde. Strawberry blonde.
Let's have a look at the lay of the land in the real country now. We've heard from the politicians. What about the people? The think tank More in Common is reporting that over a quarter of the public think the UK is unsafe for Jews and for Muslims.
Yes, after Hamas attacked Israel on the 7th of October, people have become increasingly concerned with the rise in hate and intimidation towards minority groups. This was both echoed by Michael Gove in the chamber and, of course, Angela Rayner too. Now they want the police to take tougher action. So to break this down, the UK Director of More in Common, Luke Trill, is here with us. Luke, thank you for joining us on the show. Very concerning statistics there. It may not come as a surprise because we've seen time and time again the statistics rise every month, really, since those attacks. We've seen statistics, 467% increase in anti-Semitic hate crimes, huge increases in Islamophobia crimes. Do you think what Michael Gove announced today will in any way help the situation when it comes to community cohesion?
Well, I think what Michael Gove announced today is an important first step in doing that. It absolutely can't be the case that the government is lending a platform to or funding extremists because, as our data shows, increasing numbers of the public are worried that we are becoming an unsafe country for people from Muslim and Jewish backgrounds. We also found that nearly 70% of the country are worried about the threat of Islamist terror, over 60% worried about far-right extremism. So this isn't just some academic debate in Westminster. It's something the public are really concerned about. And I think the public should be able to have a legitimate expectation that the government isn't giving a platform or funding organisations who are promoting extremism and trying to undermine fundamental British values.
It's interesting you mentioned 70% of the country are worried about Islamist terror. I imagine perhaps even more than 70% of the country would be, frankly, gobsmacked that the government has been, in some instances, funding and platforming, at least in the form of local government, groups that have been promoting Islamic violence.
Well, absolutely. There can be no doubt that the government shouldn't be doing that. And I think what's important about today's definition is that it gives more clarity and focus to previous definitions. I think there's an acknowledgement that what was used under the Prevent strategy from 2011, gave a basis, but was quite fuzzy. What this has actually done in some ways is raise the bar, so you're not capturing sort of genuine, sort of free speech. And Michael Gove was very clear this didn't apply to gender critical activists, trans activists, Christians, eco warriors, as you might call them. It's not about those groups. It's about groups who are trying to undermine the tenets of our democracy. And, we just can't be funding them. In some ways you might say we're doing their job for them if we're supporting groups who are trying to undermine the tenets of our democracy. But this is just one step, right? What we also found in that polling is that people have an appetite for the police to go much further on those marchers in terms of tackling people promoting hate, in terms of making sure that it minimises disruption, changing routes, all of that. They support the right to protest, and it's really important, British right, but they want the police to be taking action. So This is one thing in Parliament today, but there's more to do across the board.
Really interesting stuff there. Luke Trill, the UK Director of More in Common. I know you sit with these focus groups, you read this information, knowing what the public really think is so important on this issue. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, after the break, we'll be crossing over to the United States. Why? An enormous rocket is about to launch. This is Elon Musk's Starship. Now, 2 launch attempts haven't gone exactly according to plan. You might remember the last time this rocket flew, it blew up. Will it successfully launch into orbit today? Well, we'll find out in just 4 minutes' time.
Fingers crossed.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 p.m.
Our first question comes from Elliot. Elliot, hello.
Is Canada now an authoritarian state?
Elliot, I think it's been an authoritarian state for a while. I mean, under Trudeau, this is a new thing now, and this is coming from the Justice Minister, who has Arif Virani, and he has defended this new power for their online harms bill. That sounds familiar. We've got something quite similar. And they're saying they can now impose house arrest on someone who they think might commit a hate crime in the future, right? That's scary stuff, isn't it?
There's obviously a very dark side to this, because you can't, or in my opinion, you shouldn't be able to imprison somebody before they've done anything.
Right.
Well, it is Canada, and I know you in this country, you kind of respect Canada as a country. America didn't even know it was a country until recently, and I think that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to show themselves to be different than America.
I think America has a responsibility to invade. You know what? I do.
You know, you're kidding, but it may come down to this, or this may just be yeah, maybe.
Well, I just think it's ridiculous that the idea of arresting someone... I mean, our government's bad enough, and the Scottish government's out of control, the Irish government's out of control. They're all talking about... I mean, the Irish government's got a new hate crimes bill where they're talking about they can seize your phone if they suspect you might have some material that could potentially stir up hatred. I mean, for God's sake, what does that mean? Your phone's full of that kind of thing.
Well, the government knows that.
Yeah.
But you're right. But it has to do with the bigger picture, which is Canada has sucked itself in on the big team world. Sorry, I'm going to say it. It's big team world. And what they're doing, this is not even a free speech issue. This is just about silencing dissent against the Canadian government. It has nothing to do with openness and talk, whatever. It's like saying, we don't want these people to spread their opinions.
Dangerous opinions. That's what speech codes and hate speech laws always do. I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests, and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Right, OK, it is 1:24. Let's cross over to the launch of Elon Musk's £2.4 billion Starship rocket as it launches into orbit, or does it?
Well, we can see that there's 1 minute and 18 seconds left on that countdown. Now, we'll remember that this is the Starship. This is the most powerful rocket in the world. A rocket designed to take people to the moon and take people to Mars, something that's never happened before. Of course, we should explain, no people are on board this one. It's still
any animals?
Experimental phase. No animals, just some weight, just to see. So this is a test launch.
This is a very expensive test.
A very expensive
Boca Chica in Texas.
It is. It's right down on the tip of Texas, because when you are closer to the equator, you're more likely to be able to get up into orbit easily. So that's why all of the launches happen as close to the equator, either the tip of Florida or the tip of Texas. And in this case, Elon Musk has based his Starship building facility in Boca Chica.
Less than 30 seconds to go. What's that steam coming out the side?
That'll be cooling. So because there's going to be the most enormous, huge reaction taking place here to launch what is an incredibly heavy rocket. The last time this launched, it blew up. But let's look at the countdown now and see if this successfully launches.
5,
3, 2, 1.
All intact there.
So far, now it was around was it a minute into the flight last time that there was what's known as a rapid unscheduled disassembly.
Well, we can't look away now then.
Now, a rapid unscheduled disassembly might sound like technical jargon. What does it actually mean? It means it blew up. But this one, not yet blowing up. We're looking at one of the grid fins here, articulated grid fins to help the rocket come back down to Earth and, as so many SpaceX rockets do, land so it can be reused. Although this test will not be reused, it will test how the rocket can not only go up, but come back down to Earth.
And if you're a billionaire and your rocket blows up, it's probably quite a knock to the ego.
Well, I don't know if it necessarily is, because the whole thing about SpaceX and its iterative design project is unlike NASA, where they design everything in computers for years and years and years and make sure the final thing is perfect. SpaceX are a lot more bullshit with it. Right. They'll knock something together, see if it works, and if it doesn't, they'll have so many tests on it, they'll see why it didn't work. So the last one that flew, that blew up, that wasn't a failure, because they learnt why it blew up. It's full of all of these different instruments and measurements, so that they learn what works and what doesn't in a real-world setting.
I want to know how fast it's going.
Oh, that is a very good question. It will be going a very, very high speed. The most stressful element of this is when it gets through the lower stage of the atmosphere, because that's the sort of toughest bit for any rocket. But of course, as it gets higher, the rocket itself gets lighter because there's less fuel in it, and the atmosphere gets thinner, meaning it goes faster and faster and faster. So it will be accelerating at quite a speed at the moment.
And you know what? It was delayed, actually. Did you know this? It was delayed because the engineers were battling high winds and boats had to be cleared from the Gulf of Mexico. So there's been quite a lot of work put into this.
Absolutely. There's a launch window. I think the launch window was from around 11:30 this morning through to perhaps an hour or so from now. But
it's going 1,000 kilometres per hour.
That is remarkable. 1,000 kilometres. And it looks... This is a lot more successful than the previous test, by my reckoning. We're looking here at what looks like a very, very high altitude indeed.
This is a lesson for us all. This is a lesson for us all. If you fail, try again.
This is the third time lucky, perhaps. But here's stage separation. The bottom stage of the rocket successfully leaving the top stage. And this is where the first test really went wrong. It didn't separate cleanly. They fell together. It went wrong. They have fixed that problem, and the lower stage has separated while the upper stage is there above the Earth as we speak. I find this remarkable. Live pictures of the top stage of Starship rocket, of Elon Musk's most powerful rocket ever, just floating there above the Earth.
It's supposed to go to the moon and then off to Mars, is it?
It won't on this test. This test is to go around the Earth. But the rocket is designed, one that looks precisely like this, will be taking people to the moon and taking people to Mars. The idea is within the next 10 years.
Oh, I'd absolutely love that.
I think it will be such a moment to see people finally get back on the moon, back on Mars. The last time man landed on the moon, it was 1972.
Do you think space travel will ever be like popping on a flight on Ryanair?
Do you know what? It's funny you mention that, because this rocket here isn't just designed to take people to Mars and the moon. It's designed to take people also around the world in what is known as 30-minute hops, from any part of the world to another part in 30 or 45 minutes.
Wow.
Because you're not going through the atmosphere. If you go up into space and then go around the Earth and then land back down, suddenly what was a 10-hour flight is just half an hour.
Well, imagine that. I wonder how much the tickets would set you back. A few grand, a few £100,000, a few million. Anyway.
Depends if Just Stop Oil stop them.
Maybe there'll
be
a Jet 2 Ryanair version soon, in a few decades. Anyway, coming up, a debate. Should we leave the Princess of Wales, Catherine, alone and just stop the speculation about her health? It's getting wild in the United States. That's after the bulletins.
Tom, Emily, thanks very much. It's just gone 1:30. Remarkable pictures there from SpaceX launch. Do stay with us throughout the afternoon. We'll keep across that for you. But in the meantime, back here on Earth, Michael Gove has unveiled a new definition of extremism amid what he described as a growing and profound concern over extremist behaviour from all ideologies. The Communities Minister said the government's new definition is more precise and rigorous and clear than ever before. It will be used to assess which groups should be blocked from public funding. But Michael Gove insists it won't affect gender-critical campaigners, conservative religious groups or transgender activists, among others. Delivering the statement in the Commons earlier, Mr Gove said it will make vital frontline anti-radicalisation work more effective.
We have to be clear-eyed about the threat we face, precise about where that threat comes from, and rigorous in defending our democracy. That means upholding freedom of expression, religion and belief when they are threatened, facing down harassment and hate, supporting the communities facing the greatest challenge from extremist activity, and ensuring this House and this country are safe, free and united.
Well, some Conservative backbenchers have suggested that the new definition lands in no man's land, saying it's neither strong enough to tackle true extremists or protect opposing views. Labour's Angela Rayner also accused the government of taking too long to act.
It begs the question, why has it taken the government 13 years to address this? The Secretary of State says that organisations which are clearly extreme have benefited from government engagement, endorsement and support, and even suggests that those groups have exploited government engagement.
And finally, some latest developments in news we covered this morning. At least 2 firefighters, we understand, have been injured tackling a large blaze at a high-rise block of flats in Edinburgh, which forced 100 people, including a member of the Scottish Parliament, to flee their homes. Around 70 firefighters with 12 fire engines and specialist resources have been battling the blaze since the early hours of this morning. Other emergency services are on the scene, providing support and assistance to those whose homes have been affected. Those are the headlines, plenty more still to come, and in the meantime you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
For a valuable legacy your family can own, gold coins will always shine bright. Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of the markets this afternoon. The pound will buy you $1.2792 and €1.1706. The price of gold is £1,692.69. That's per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 7,763 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Most of us will see a bit of rain today, but across eastern England it may well stay mostly dry, and that's where we'll see some pretty high temperatures as well. Low pressure, though, is still controlling our weather, and these two weather fronts are moving across the country, both providing some outbreaks of rain, persistent rain through central and southern Scotland. Soggy old afternoon here, bit of snow likely on the tops of the hills, but much of the Highlands, the Northern Isles will stay dry and bright. And mostly dry across East Anglia and the south east, although we will see lots more cloud coming in. But showery rain for Wales and southwest England. Look at the temperature there for England and Wales, very mild, 16 with a bit of brightness. We could reach 17 Celsius. Feeling cold, though, with that persistent rain over the central belt of Scotland. That rain does linger through much of tonight as well. More showers to come for Northern Ireland. There'll be some showery rain for England and Wales. And then through the second half of the night, we'll see some heavier rain coming into Wales and the far southwest. We may have the odd rumble of thunder mixed in with that. Another pretty mild night, certainly for England and Wales. A bit of a chilly one in the far north of Scotland, where the winds are coming in from the north. Still providing a bit of snow over the tops of the hills. Another fairly damp day for Scotland. Some heavy showery rain along the M4 and the M25 early on Friday. That'll clear away, and then we're left with a mixture of bright or sunny spells, but plenty of showers to come as well. Again, fairly mild across England and Wales, though it will be breezier. Another pretty chilly one in Scotland.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, Princess Catherine has been crowned Britain's favourite royal, but the survey was taken before the Princess of Wales' recent photo editing scandal and weeks of speculation over her health.
We've seen weeks of controversy, speculation and online conspiracy theories following the princess's major abdominal surgery. But is it time to give Kate a break?
Has it all gone a bit too far? I mean, the chat shows in the United States, they've been going overboard on this. Joining us now is entrepreneur and social commentator Joanna Jarju, who thinks Kate should remain in the spotlight. Joanna, why do you say that? Surely no woman on earth could put up with this amount of speculation and conspiracy over their health. Shouldn't she just be left to recover?
Well, I think that Kate was being left to recover to an extent until the royal family actually created this storm that we're witnessing at the moment. I think that the people over in the US and the press over there are actually doing their job. And it's actually exposing a lot of, this secret relationship that this royal family has had with the press over time that has basically meant that they can have their cake and eat it. I would have no problem with this if a standard hadn't already been set when it comes to Meghan Markle. But it seems as if it's one rule for Meghan Markle and Harry and another rule for Princess Kate. And really, the royal family have done themselves no favors whatsoever with the editing, with not disclosing certain information, when you've got the king talking about his cancer diagnosis, but it's all hush-hush with Kate. They've created this storm, and actually, as the general public who pay for the royal family, we have every right to know what's going on behind closed doors.
Joanna, that's a bit of a harsh way to look at it, isn't it? Oh, Meghan Markle has suffered a lot by the British press, therefore Kate should put up with it. Do two wrongs make a right?
Well, the thing is, when Meghan Markle was going through that, people who were defenders of Princess Kate and of William were saying, this is what this is what you signed up for. This is part of the job. You don't get to pick and choose when you get privacy. And then now it's completely changed when it comes to Kate. And like I said, a lot of this is actually being instigated by the royal family with their lies or with not, being in a position where they're not forthcoming with certain bits of information. They have caused this. And if anybody should lay off Kate, it should actually be the people within the institution who seem to be laying all the blame on Kate's doorstep when it comes to things like editing pictures. Clearly, they're more interested in actually protecting the institution than protecting Kate herself, which should be part of their responsibility.
I find it just extraordinary that the royal family needed to move away from their age-old mantra of never complain, never explain. The big furore of conspiracy all kicked up when a photo was released after the royal family initially said you're not going to see Princess Catherine until Easter. If they'd have just stuck with that, then perhaps this wouldn't have reached the fever pitch that it has.
Well, look, this is the same thing that I was just talking about. They want it one way, but then they also want it the other way. You've got the king disclosing about the prostate cancer. Then you've got him disclosing again that he's been diagnosed with a different type of cancer, but then not really telling us what that type of cancer is. And then you've got them telling us about this apparent, planned operation that Kate was having, but we're not allowed to know the rest. They set this precedent as soon as they had women within the royal family 5 hours after giving birth, standing on a doorstep and parading themselves in front of a crowd. So they can't pick and choose. And actually, they owe us that responsibility to actually give us the information. We're the ones that are paying for them.
But Joanna, you said the journalists in the United States are doing their job by investigating these conspiracies, but really they're just gossiping. I mean, I've seen clips from talk shows in the States where they're just laying out any conspiracy theory they can think of. They're pontificating over Catherine and William's marriage. They're talking about whether the royal family are hiding her somewhere, whether things are more serious. They're talking about all sorts. Surely that's not an appropriate way to behave, surely?
Well, look, there's a certain line, obviously, isn't there, when it comes to conspiracy theories, but also there's the difference where you doing a complete 180 and you're not looking into anything at all. I, for one, am not going to sit here and drink whatever Kool-Aid the royal family decide to serve me, and I'm not going to be gaslighted about certain things. If a picture has been edited and it's obvious that it's been edited, then really the press over in the UK, who are, supposed to be journalists on behalf of all of us that are taxpayers, should be looking into things and should be demanding that we get certain answers. But why is it that they can just have their cake and eat it, and we're just supposed to lap up whatever story that they decide to give us? But the difference is now they're slipping up, and they're slipping up quite badly, to be honest. And it's embarrassing, really, for the UK on the world stage.
I mean, we're looking at some of the pictures of this edited photo here. The rumours are that sort of she wasn't in it, it's all old, it's all whatever. I mean, to me, this looks like it's very simply photos that were taken in quick succession that have been stitched together so that it looks like a nice photograph. I mean, we saw a very clear line between sort of half of her zip and the other half of her zip. Those are two photos taken in quick succession that have been stitched together. Why is there so much conspiracy over something that is fairly standard practice in family portraiture?
No, that is not standard practice, okay? You might have a bit of blurring. Maybe they could have put the saturation up if Kate was looking a bit pale and unwell. They have literally, it looks like, copied and pasted, extended Charlotte's skirt, completely unnecessary things, and gone to complete lengths that nobody else would go to just to put up
it's completely standard. If you have fidgety kids in a picture, a professional photographer...
How on earth do you know, Tom? How on earth do you know what they've done with the picture? You do not know. You're speculating just as much as anyone else.
It's possible to happen. And I have seen, like everyone else in this country has seen, all of the adverts from various mobile phone manufacturers that say, take this picture and you can pick the best face of each people. Will take 6 pictures and pick the best one and swap and whatever. It happens all the time.
Tom, the press team over at Kensington Palace and William and Kate are smart enough to know that this photo is probably the most important, apart from their wedding picture and the babies, is probably the most important picture that they've had to produce. So then to put a picture that has clearly been doctored in some way, and then to actually specify that it was a week ago, that is obviously saying this is our official statement to show you at what health Kate is at the moment. And I think it completely contradicts itself anyway, because if Kate is sat there in skinny jeans, looking, a bill of health, her arms around her kids, then from a taxpayer's perspective and from the general public's perspective, why are you not doing Zoom calls? If it was the rest of us, the government would be saying, get off the dole and get back to work, or at least work remotely.
Well, Joanna, a lot of people are saying, why don't they just film a short little clip of the princess, so everyone knows she's okay?
Because that's like a hostage video.
But is that really... Well, I mean, what's happening now is that you have people throwing out all sorts of conspiracy theories. You have so much speculation. Social media is saying all sorts of nasty things about her. Very easy to just prove that, that she's recovering from a surgery, but perhaps that's too much of a... Perhaps that's not very nice, actually. If she's in, if she's in recovery mode, you don't necessarily want to... I don't know.
I think one thing that's true is that the institution is going to protect the institution. And obviously, it's awful to see some of the more horrible comments against Kate online. You know, I would completely condemn things like that. But also, the institution are not doing a very good job of actually protecting her, throwing her under the bus. Even if she was the one who actually edited that picture, why would you have her take that responsibility and be the one that's actually being basically thrown to the dogs or thrown to the wolves? For more people to say, oh, it's Kate's editing. Then you've got people on Twitter that are taking her quote and saying, oh, as an amateur photographer, and then copying and pasting and photoshopping other stuff on the picture. It's actually made Kate a mockery. And I think that the royal family would probably go to any lengths whatsoever to protect William and to protect the institution. We've seen that when it comes to Meghan and Harry, and I don't think it's any different when it comes to Princess Kate. And in that sense, I actually feel quite sorry for her because she's probably...
And yet we've seen polling out this week that shows Princess Catherine is the most popular royal. So if it's all a big plot from the royals to say, let's make her the fall guy, it's spectacularly backfired.
She might be the most popular, but she is not the king in waiting. She's not the monarch in waiting. And I think the royal family will go to any lengths, no matter how popular she is. She's still in William's shadow.
Well, Joanna,
so
we've run out of time, but thank you so much for putting your case across. Really good to hear. Even if I
think we can all agree we wish her the very best of health. So, coming up, speaking exclusively to GB News, Defence Secretary Grant Shapps urges Donald Trump not to cut aid to Ukraine if he wins the US presidential election. We'll bring you that after the break.
I'm Nigel Farage, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
Well, we've been a constitutional monarchy since the late 17th century, and of course part of that deal is that the monarch, or indeed the close immediate royal family, should not interfere with politics that in any way could be seen to affect individual parties. Now, perhaps one of the most classic cases in the 20th century was Edward VIII, who during his brief reign went down to Merthyr Tydfil in South Wales, met thousands of people who'd lost their jobs in the steel industry. In fact, he shook so many hands in the end he had to change and shake with his left hand, and he said something must be done to get these people jobs. It was taken as a direct assault on the Conservative government of the day. And we could go on to Edward Heath, as many saw it, using the Queen to get us to join the common market, and things the Queen said during the referendum on Scottish separation. And we could, of course, talk about King Charles, who as Prince of Wales endlessly talked about climate change and net zero. But the intervention overnight from Prince William, I think, is the most direct political piece of interference that has international and global implications that I almost think we've ever seen. Prince William is saying to Israel, stop what you're doing. Some will see that as being given a free pass to Hamas. Many young people will say, hooray, he's doing the right thing. But whether he's doing the right thing or not, has he gone just too far with this? Should our future king intervene in this way? I don't believe that he should. I think he's making a very big mistake.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio, and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Good Good afternoon, Britain. It's coming up to 10 minutes to 2, and the Defence Secretary is urging Donald Trump not to cut aid to Ukraine if he wins the US presidential election.
Yes, speaking exclusively to GB News in Poland as he watched UK troops take part in a NATO exercise, Grant Shapps warned the former United States president it's cheaper by half the price to absolutely back Ukraine now.
Well, let's speak with defence analyst Chris Newton, because, Chris, a lot of people in the defence community in and around NATO are quite worried about what the prospect of a Donald Trump presidency means. But, of course, there are others on the other side of the coin that says, actually, there are lots of countries in Europe that have not been paying their way. Perhaps a belligerent voice in the White House is who's needed to encourage some of these countries to start paying properly for their own defence.
Good afternoon. You're right in the sense that there's a complete, really, absence of leadership in the West on both sides of the Atlantic. We have Biden's weakness, although he has been providing aid, but then you have Trump as well. Not, with his comments on Ukraine, as you mentioned, but also on this side of the Atlantic as well, with leaders such as Schultz, hesitating in terms of providing aid as well. And you make a fair point with, you do need US leadership to provide a kind of a jolt to the Europeans in order to provide the aid. The problem with Trump, of course, is that he said he's indicating that he'll curtail or cut the aid, and that's no good either, because that will give Russia pretty much free rein to take more Ukrainian territory.
And Chris, a lot of people are concerned by just how long this war has now been raging and whether Ukraine are making adequate progress. How do you see things as they are now?
Yes, I mean, at the moment, things are worrying. We've seen recent Russian slow advances, but they're advances nonetheless. Russia has recently captured Avdiivka, although they've been trying to capture that for months and years, so things are concerning. But the Ukrainians are, we're not seeing kind of massive Russian advances or a major breakthrough. So the Ukrainians still have a chance, still have the opportunity in this war of attrition to hold back the Russians, but that is dependent on the West providing aid, on the West providing them with the ammunition, with equipment, and so forth. As we're seeing at the moment, if there's a hesitation in that regard, that's when you see the Russians using their advantages in artillery to effectively obliterate tactical objectives and make further advances. So Ukrainian success is dependent on the West's ability to provide aid. And there are consequences if Russia does succeed and achieve their aims. There's consequences for Ukrainians, but also for the wider international system and international order as well.
Looking at the size of the economy of the European Union, it sees itself in many ways economically as a competitor to the United States, as a bloc in and of itself. But when it comes to defence, it's just simply nowhere near. We've seen so many countries frankly refuse to meet their 2% target for NATO spending, for defence spending as a member of NATO. Frankly, perhaps what Europe needs to do is look itself in the mirror here.
And you're right. I completely agree with that. And some European countries are stepping up to the plate. You have Poland with pledging for 4% of GDP on defence, and the countries in Eastern Europe, the countries nearer to Russia, they have a real incentive to increase defence spending and to look at their defence policies. But it's the countries in Western Europe that need, with the bigger economies, that need to also reflect and look at their own defence spending and their defence policies. Now, if a major conventional war isn't a wake-up call to everybody, I'm not quite sure what is. So So in that sense, it really is time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you very much indeed, Chris Newton, for joining us, defence analyst, of course.
Well, should kids be doing homework for their parents? Find out after this.
Really happening.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Most of us will see a bit of rain today, but across eastern England it may well stay mostly dry, and that's where we'll see some pretty high temperatures as well. Low pressure, though, is still controlling our weather, and these two weather fronts are moving across the country, both providing some outbreaks of rain, persistent rain through central and southern Scotland. Soggy old afternoon here, bit of snow likely on the tops of the hills, but much of the Highlands, the Northern Isles, will stay dry and bright. And mostly dry across East Anglia and the southeast, although we will see lots more cloud coming in. But showery rain for Wales and southwest England. Look at the temperature there for England and Wales. Very mild, 16 with a bit of brightness. We could reach 17 Celsius. Feeling cold, though, with that persistent rain over the central belt of Scotland. That rain does linger through much of tonight as well. More showers to come for Northern Ireland. There'll be some showery rain for England and Wales. And then through the second half of the night, we'll see some heavier rain coming into Wales and the far southwest. May have the odd rumble of thunder mixed in with that. Another pretty mild night, certainly for England and Wales. A bit of a chilly one in the far north of Scotland, where the winds are coming in from the north. Still providing a bit of snow over the tops of the hills. Another fairly damp day for Scotland. Some heavy showery rain along the M4 and the M25 early on Friday. That'll clear away, and then we're left with a mixture of bright or sunny spells, but plenty of showers to come as well. Again, fairly mild across England and Wales, though it will be breezier. Another pretty chilly one in Scotland.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Want to be a winner?
You've won £18,000.
I'm flipping heck. I don't know what to say.
Enter our massive spring giveaway with 3 big seasonal prizes to be won. There's £12,345 in tax-free cash to give your finances a spring boost. We'll also send you on a shopping spree with £500 worth of vouchers to spend in the store of your choice. You'll also get a garden gadget package. For another chance to win the vouchers, the treats and £12,345 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB03 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday the 29th of March. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if watching or listening on demand. Good luck.
From 10 a.m. every Saturday, we want to make you think and we want to make you laugh.
So we will give you all the top stories.
Now we start with a story that has shocked the nation this week.
But we're also going to make it light and fun and bring some entertainment in to make your Saturday morning nice and restful.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive?
Incompetent? That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Thursday, the 14th of March.
Extremism crackdown. The government unveils a more precise and rigorous definition, with Michael Gove telling MPs the time has come for us all to stand together to combat the forces of division and to beat this poison.
Nursing degree fraud. Groups of teens online are admitting to doing their relatives' degree coursework. Relatives who can't speak English. Could underqualified medics put people's lives in jeopardy?
And aid for Ukraine. Defence Secretary warns Donald Trump not to cut funding for Ukraine if he is to be successful in the presidential election, saying it's cheaper by half the price to absolutely back Ukraine now.
This announcement from Michael Gove today has set lots of different quarters alight. You have some people who have been very critical of it on civil liberties grounds, but then you've had another coalition of groups, of Muslim groups, denying that there's a problem with extremism in the first place.
Which is rather problematic. Or concerning, at least. But I do agree with Michael Gove that in order to protect freedom of speech, in order to protect our civil liberties and our liberal democracy, you have to clamp down on extremism. You can't live in a society where extremists are able to run rampant and still claim to have freedom of speech for all.
And the worst thing is, the examples that Michael Gove gave of local authorities and different arms and branches of government giving money to extremist groups, supporting extremist groups, inviting extremists into our schools. We heard about the Lewisham Islamic Centre, which sent a speaker into schools who had promoted Islamic violence. I mean, this stuff is clearly wrong, and it's not even necessarily about freedom of speech, because it's not even saying these people should be locked up and the key thrown away. It's saying that these people should not be given taxpayers' money.
Well, I mean, it boggles the mind that this is even happening. But forgive me if I'm a little bit sceptical over whether this will have a huge impact. But if it does, you know, I'll bite my tongue, hold my hands up.
Well, I mean, ultimately...
but I do think that this is just centring around public funding. We do already have lots of laws about harassment, extremism, violence, intimidation, racism, all sorts of things. Perhaps the government should be looking at how those laws are enforced before they try and, you know, draft all this guidance which may or may not make a difference.
Although there's this added, I suppose, societal bonus. If an organisation is on the government's official do not engage with list, perhaps civic society would also shun that organisation too. But much more to come after your headlines with Sam.
Tom, Emily, thanks very much. Good afternoon from the newsroom. It's just gone 2 o'clock. The headlines this hour. Michael Gove has unveiled a new definition of extremism amid what he described as growing and profound concerns over behaviour from all ideologies. The Community Secretary said the government's new definition is more precise, rigorous and clear than ever before. It will be used to assess which groups should be blocked from public funding. But Michael Gove insists it won't affect gender-critical campaigners, conservative religious groups or transgender activists. Here's Mr Gove delivering that statement in the Commons earlier.
We have to be clear-eyed about the threat we face, precise about where that threat comes from, and rigorous in defending our democracy. That means upholding freedom of expression, religion and belief when they are threatened, facing down harassment and hate, supporting the communities facing the greatest challenge from extremist activity, and ensuring this House and this country are safe, free and united.
In response to that statement, some Conservative backbenchers suggested that the new definition lands in no man's land, saying it's neither strong enough to tackle true extremists nor protect opposing views. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has said that there are new threats which must be tackled together.
I think the debate about extremism has to be taken very, very seriously because there hasn't really been a review of extremism now for a number of years. There are new threats and it is important, therefore, that we all come together to look at the question of extremism and what action is now needed. What I would say is that this will only work if it is truly cross-party and not divisive. And that's the spirit in which I want to enter this discussion in relation to extremism.
Well, I just want to bring you some breaking news that we've been getting from government sources into us here at GB News, that Russia has been accused of disrupting the GPS signal on the Defence Secretary's plane while he was en route to Poland. We understand the incident occurred as the RAF jet he was on board flew close to the edge of Kaliningrad. GPS navigation and internet access was lost for around 30 minutes during that flight. The pilots, though, have confirmed the aircraft was never at risk. That incident happened as Grant Shapps is visiting British troops in Poland who are participating in NATO exercises. Diane Abbott has accused both major political parties of failing to tackle racism. Writing in The Guardian today, the Independent MP criticised the Commons Speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, after she wasn't called to speak in Parliament yesterday. It left Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer to debate comments made about her. It's after the Prime Minister faced calls to return a £10 million donation made by the Conservatives' biggest donor, Frank Hester, after comments he made about Miss Abbott were widely seen to be racist. Well, in other news, at least 2 firefighters have been injured while tackling a large blaze at a high-rise block of flats in Edinburgh, which forced some 100 people, including a member of the Scottish Parliament, to flee their homes. Around 70 firefighters with 12 fire engines have been battling the blaze since the early hours of this morning. Other emergency services are still on the scene, providing support and assistance to those whose homes have been affected. More than half of first-time buyers teamed up with someone else to buy their home last year. That's according to data from TSB. It found that 57% of purchases were made with someone else, with just 46% going it alone. More buyers are also stretching out their home loans for longer as affordability of housing becomes increasingly difficult for many house hunters. China's foreign ministry has criticised a plan in the US to force the owner of TikTok to sell the social media app. The bill, which passed with bipartisan support yesterday, aims to address concerns over the Chinese government's influence on the algorithm that's behind the video app, which is used by 170 million people in the US alone. A spokesperson for China's foreign ministry, though, described those plans as unfair. And finally, some news for gardeners. If you're grappling with slugs and snails, well, we're being urged to make peace with the slippery garden grubs. The Royal Horticultural Society is partnering with the Wildlife Trust to change the perception of the little creatures. They've long been seen as the gardener's worst enemy due to their appetite for chomping through the leaves of prized blooms. But experts say that out of 150 species, only a small few pose any threats to your garden. They say that they're actually an essential part of our ecosystem, feeding on rotting plants and recycling the nutrients back into your soil. Those are the headlines, plenty more still to come, but in the meantime you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the code on your screen or go to GB News Alerts, gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Tom and Emily.
It's 2:08. Welcome back to Good Afternoon Britain with me, Emily, and Tom. Now, Westminster is awash with rumours this afternoon that there actually could be a mayor election. Let's speak to our political editor, Christopher Hope, to find out more. Christopher, is there truth to this rumour? Could it actually be that we may see an election called as early as May?
Well, there's literally truth in the rumour, Emily and Tom, but whether it happens is a different matter altogether. Now, we've heard from the Prime Minister today in Gloucestershire. He said that the working assumption is the election will be held in the second half of this year, so after the end of June, and that's what he said, didn't he, in January. He hasn't moved from that. But I've been doing some work for GB News viewers and you both to find out what's really going on. What I'm being told are there are two factions in Downing Street, a spring and an autumn faction, and there is a genuine, this is according to Tory MPs, a genuine tug of war about when to have the election. Now, some MPs have told me they think the PM could call an election as soon as Wednesday or Thursday next week, allowing time for a wash-up in Parliament and then a dissolution of Parliament on the 26th of March. So the view is amongst some Tory MPs that this could be the weekend when the PM decides whether to have the election. Again, also to be very clear, whenever I ask Number 10, they always indicate really clearly it's going to be in the second half of the year and it's not going to be a May election, and they repeatedly deny it. So that, to be quite clear to viewers and listeners, that's what's happening. Having said that, I'm old enough to remember the 2017 general election, when I think Theresa May denied having an election in that June 3 times, and then she had one. So I don't want anyone to spill their cups of tea over lunch or coffee. I'm just saying to you, that is what is being said in Parliament at the moment. Tory MPs feel that this is the weekend when the PM issues a go or a stop notice on this speculation, because he's not saying it won't be in May. That's a crucial point. The clip we had earlier on your programme an hour ago, it's almost as important as what he didn't say as what he did say.
And Christopher, it's clear they're laying the groundwork in case one could be called. I was speaking to some sources in the House of Lords yesterday who said that Conservative peers have been told to give their private email addresses to Conservative campaign headquarters, because when an election's called, they won't be able to use their governmental email addresses. And also, Conservative members of the House of Lords have been told by their party to say whether or not they're up for knocking on doors.
Well, I mean, OK, let's play devil's advocate. I mean, the argument for having a May election is that, you know, you get the Rwanda bill through on Monday in ping-pong in the House of Lords. You then go to the country saying, we've got the plan, but Labour's going to scrap it. Don't let them scrap it before we can see if it's going to work. The risk of delaying means if the Rwanda plan doesn't work and you don't send people back to the Rwanda by November, then it's seen to be a dead duck, and it will be rightly put out of its misery. So the hope of Rwanda working and Labour axing it is a reason to go. Maybe we're turning the corner with the economy. They don't want to have another flow of small boats across the channel this summer, and that looks bad, of course, electorally. You go long, though, you allow the economy to turn around more. Interest rates will have fallen. Mortgage might feel better. Mr Sunak himself gets 2 years as Prime Minister, which is better than 18 months for his legacy if he's out the door anyway after the next election. You know, there's all sorts of reasons that he might go long, but there are some reasons to go short, and I think that is the debate being held in number 10. And I was surprised to hear this. I can tell you, by the way, that Labour MPs were told to get their election addresses in. That's the official leaflet they have that goes to homes. Their addresses were put in 2 days ago. So Labour MPs have now submitted their election addresses for a May general election. All this plays into the hands of the Labour Party, because they've been saying they think there might be a May election repeatedly on our channel and elsewhere, because they want to show the PM is being a bit scared of having an election. So when he doesn't hold one, they can say he's clinging on to power. So there's lots of games at play. We don't know yet what's happening, but this is a live conversation in Westminster I thought that the viewers and listeners should hear about.
I mean, Christopher, are the Labour Party ready for an election? They may say they are, but where are they with their manifesto?
Well, they aren't yet. The time for signing off their manifesto, they've had a series of policy groups meeting, and that was going to meet, I think, in May or June to sign off ahead of what could be the autumn election. But Keir Starmer's been very clear. They are ready to go. If the PM calls an election, they are ready to go. And you can organise a manifesto in short order. It happened in 2017 and 2019. In fact, those are the last two elections that were not meant to be called then. This is the first election since 2015 when we know roughly the two winners when it'll be held. The other two were surprise elections triggered by the chaos caused by Brexit. So the difference here is that we know that they're going to have an election in the next 7 or 8 months.
Well, my money's on November. I don't know if yours still is, Chris.
Shall I go May?
Oh, no, it is. My money is definitely on. I'm with you, Tom. It's always wise to be with you, Tom, on everything, but I'm particularly with you on this one. Definitely November.
It's interesting, the framing of this around the Rwanda bill. I mean, whatever happens with the Rwanda bill, is that really what people are going to vote on when it comes to a general election?
The size of the issue that Brexit was that worked so well for Boris Johnson. But Christopher Hope, thank you very much for joining us and bringing us what's being whispered in the corridors of power live to our TV screens.
Yes, well, earlier, Community Secretary Michael Gove named groups as he outlined new extremism definition in the Commons. Shall we hear from the founder of the Oxford Institute for British Islam, Dr. Taj Haji? Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Taj. Good to speak to you again. Your reaction to what Michael Gove had to say and the fact that he did name a number of Muslim organisations that may have cause for concern?
Yeah, I think this announcement by Michael Gove is problematic for many Muslims because, for example, he mentioned some groups. I don't need to repeat it now, but and has omitted others. So the question then is for the Muslim public, which is a so-called kosher halal organization and which is not. I think we need a greater clarity there. And I think this definition, this revamped definition, doesn't really address the issue. For example, what about sexism and racism? Are those also outlawed? Or is it just some ideologies that the government deems as inappropriate? I think we need to have a definition that's consistent and principled. We're supposed to be a nation that values and extols free speech and free expression. So when are we going to, what is the line? That's what I want to know.
But Taj, I mean, they have given a definition. Perhaps you think this is still too vague. It says extremism is the promotion or advancement of an ideology based on violence, hatred or intolerance, negates or destroys the fundamental rights and freedoms of others, undermines, overturns or replaces the UK system of liberal parliamentary democracy and democratic rights.
I don't have an issue with that. Go further, and that's where the problem is. I mean, for example, the issue of anti-Semitism. So is anti-Semitism to do with the individual person in this country or to do about criticizing Israel? I mean, for example, can I criticize India or the United States or Argentina and there'd be no hassle? But the moment I want to criticize Israeli policies, then I'm automatically anti-Semite.
But Taj, that's not what this discussion touched on today in the House of Commons. Michael Gove made clear that this was supporting freedom of speech, made clear that whether you fell on one particular side of an argument, you wouldn't be touched by this.
Yes,
this is about specific organisations wanting to undermine parliamentary democracy.
Right, so it talked about... I don't have issues with those things. We need really to find, I mean, for example, if we're going to gun, and I want to gun all of these fanatical fundamentalists and fruitcake Muslims, I'm the number one on the barricades there. So that's not the issue here. The issue here is now, for example, the ultra-right-wing Netanyahu government has rallied these troops worldwide to say, listen, the moment anyone attacks Israel, that's automatically anti-Semitic. That's the issue here. And
I'm not sure that's fair.
We are really skirting the issues here.
I'm not sure that's fair, and I'm not sure whether this guidance will in any way speak to that. But are you aware? Are you aware?
Okay, hang on a minute. The Palestinian Solidarity Committee group, whatever, has been accused of being anti-Semitic. Why? Okay, so the question is, Emily, that we really need to understand, you know, that yes, anti-Semitism is wrong. But can we have anti-Israeli perspectives?
I guess the line is there if you're supportive of a prescribed terrorist group. So, for example, if someone expressed support for Hamas, then that might be seen as trying to undermine...
But Taj, isn't it notable that in the House of Commons today, and we heard this live on GBNews, Michael Gove said that it wasn't, he didn't mention the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign. He mentioned the Muslim Brotherhood, the sort of Gaza branch of which is Hamas. He mentioned Hamas, he mentioned the Muslim Brotherhood, he mentioned Cage, he mentioned MEND. He didn't mention the Palestine Solidarity Campaign.
No, I understand, but this is a thin edge of the wedge, okay? I think he was right to call out the Muslim Council of Muslim Association of Britain about men and Engage and all others. I don't have issues with that. But the point is, where are we going to draw the line? That's the issue here. And the point is, we haven't really discussed as a nation, when is it legitimate to criticize Israeli policies as opposed to being anti-Semitic? The two are not the same.
I think that would come under the whole debate that the government has had in the past about what exactly the definition of anti-Semitism should be and what exactly the definition of Islamophobia and anti-Muslim hatred should be. And I agree with you that it is a very difficult thing to define in law and to apply equally to people. And I completely accept your point there. Do you think the government should just give up on trying to define what exactly extremism is? Do you think our country, which has all sorts of different people in it, can all agree on one definition of what extremism is? To one person, something might be extreme. To another, it might not be.
No, I think that the definition has been revived and revamped. There's some merit to it. You know, a promotion of an ideology that fosters violence, intolerance, and hatred. I think we can all agree on that. But the point then is the proof of the pudding is in nitty-gritty. So what about groups like the Palestinian Solidarity Committee and others? Because for some people, this group is just anti-Semitic. And for other people, this group is calling for justice and peace in Gaza. So the question is, how do we reconcile this?
Well, of course, what Michael Gove would say to that is that the Counter-Extremism Centre of Excellence within his department will be a neutral arbiter of all of these things. I suppose we'll have to wait and see what actually happens. But for now, Taj Harjay of the Oxford Institute for British Islam, thank you very much for joining us on Good Afternoon Britain.
Wouldn't it be nice if we could all agree on what extremism is and what is and isn't acceptable in a liberal democracy? That would be nice, wouldn't it?
If we could all agree on lots of things that I personally agree with, I think the world would be a much better place.
I like disagreeing with you, it's fun. Coming up, shocking revelations concerning nursing degree fraud, with groups online publicly admitting to doing their parents' homework. What could this mean for our NHS? More on that soon.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
For decades, Britain has been dealing with immigration, but for one part of the UK, it is a relatively new experience. GB News' Northern Ireland reporter Doogie Beattie has this report.
At the end of April 2023, Ireland's immigration was up by 31%. And over a decade, Northern Ireland's has doubled, with South Belfast being the most diverse. Tracy Kelly is a DUP Belfast City Councillor who deals with the issues in this area on a daily basis.
We have working class communities like Sandy Row, like the Donegal Pass, who are blending in with others who are coming here to work and live and mix. But there is also an issue when there's too many people who can't get housed. That seems to be the main issue that I deal with. When people in their own community who've been born and reared here have to move away because there's a lack of housing.
Takura Makoni represents the African community of Northern Ireland.
I would presume mostly 99% of asylum seekers or migrants and refugees coming to this part of the world would have very little knowledge about the internal dynamics in Northern Ireland. So you find out it's almost like you're thrown in the deep water. To have the cognizance to say, here, I need to pick up that I'm living on a peace line and these guys don't like those guys and maybe these guys can tolerate me and those ones won't. You don't have any idea of that. It'll take you up to 10 years to get a real sense of that because, remember, you're focused on trying to rebuild your life.
To avoid further tensions, should government be looking at the placement of those refugees and migrants?
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News.
Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
From 10 a.m. every Saturday, we want to make you think and we want to make you laugh.
So we will give you all the top stories.
Now we start with a story that has shocked the nation this week.
But we're also going to make it light and fun and bring some entertainment in to make your Saturday morning nice and restful.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 2:24, and have you ever had help on your coursework or your homework? Maybe you've had your parents do it, or even your children.
Well, nursing fraud concerns have been raised after dozens of young Britons have admitted to helping older relatives pass nursing degrees and other healthcare qualifications.
Surely not. Well, GB News reporter Charlie Peters joins us now, who's been doing some digging into this. Charlie, what have you found?
Well, the truth is, Emily, the digging wasn't so difficult because so many of these claims, these brazen admissions, were just posted online earlier in the week. Someone posted on X to say that they were aware of this as a trend, and it soon followed that so many people admitted that they had done the same, that their mum's assignments were handed in by virtue of their support, that they felt as though they could have taken some of the tests in person, that they were supporting them with maths and English and also other clinical assessments remotely. One even said that there are 4 or 5 degrees in the family that they felt as a child they had contributed to significantly. One had said online, deleted after we got in touch, that they felt as though their name should be on the certificate. Well, this trend and this discussion also went over to TikTok, and we have a clip we can show you now with that discussion.
I saw a TikTok of the man in question doing his mum's uni work. You guys are out here doing, and you guys, because I read through the comments, you guys are out here doing your parents' work. Someone said, yeah, I was a mental health nurse by 16. His mum was African. They must really just think we're just some sort of robot. When they heard us, they thought, yep, no, I've just got help for life. I get favours. Your parents have you doing degrees for them.
A mental health nurse by 16 because of all the support that commenter was giving to their parents. Well, as you can imagine, this has raised an enormous amount of concern with doctors we've spoken to, with one telling me anonymously, of course, that they were especially concerned about how this could be putting lives in jeopardy, going on to say that what assessments had these trainee nurses being put through, asking us what could they possibly be missing out on by virtue of having their children run the assessment. When we reached out to the Nursing and Midwifery Council, they thanked us for raising this issue, but said that they hadn't seen anything formally on their records. They're not aware of this trend. And they did also stress that those who go through approved educational institutions for their nursing training have some 2,300 hours of practical and other clinical training. But regardless of all that, it's certainly the case that we saw dozens of admissions amid this viral conversation about potential nursing degree fraud.
It is remarkable, Charlie, to hear this story because, as we said in the introduction, it's normally that we hear it's parents helping out their kids, people whose brains are still developing. But clearly it's the other way around. And the only thing that I can think of in terms of how this could possibly be the case is that perhaps the kids are better at speaking the language than the parents. And now that has some clinical implications, surely, with regard to communication.
Yeah, some people did say that they were supporting mostly on maths and English work. But as you say, Tom, being able to communicate effectively as a nurse or a medical professional is absolutely vital. And to think that some people applying for those nursing qualifications or having that assessment are in effect cheating and putting forward their child's work and not their own has raised significant concern among some medics that we've been speaking to. One also told us that many of the situations they'd been in as a doctor in hospitals in London made more sense as a consequence of seeing so many of these posts online. Issues that previously seemed strange or didn't make much sense, they now thought, well, if a teenager was writing that assessment on that relevant situation, well, I can perfectly understand why that nurse might have made that choice.
Thank you very much indeed, Charlie Peters, GB News reporter. I mean, there is one alternative, that these children or teenagers are just sort of over-egging it. And they think it's all, exaggerating, boasting that they do their parents' homework.
But every single one of them's going, yeah. I mean, there's got to be a kernel of truth there.
Oh, no, absolutely. And Charlie's done his homework, speaking to people at the NHS.
Does he have any secret children who've been doing his homework for him?
I just think, teenagers do say a lot of things, don't they? And they like to big themselves up sometimes.
Yes.
So it could be like, their parent was stuck on a particular thing and they came over and said, oh, I know how to do it.
Yeah, but that's the wrong way round. I mean, surely, people's brains
parents shouldn't be doing children's homework either, should they?
At the age of young teenagerdom. No, really, really concerning stuff. But also points to this issue within the NHS. We've had how many thousand more nurses? How many thousand more people on the front line of the NHS, and things haven't seemed to be improving? I mean, obviously a very small part of the puzzle, but perhaps part of that puzzle is this scandal.
Certainly worth investigating. Now, the Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps, says Donald Trump should not cut aid to Ukraine if he wins the presidential election.
And that plane that you can see in the background there, apparently tampered with by Russia. Find out how after this.
Good afternoon from the GB Newsroom, 2:30. The headlines this half hour. Michael Gove has now named some of the groups to be investigated under a new definition of extremism, which he says will mean the government can express more clearly than ever who poses a risk to Britain's security. The groups include the Muslim Association of Britain, Cage and Mend, which are alleged to have Islamist views, and the British National Movement and Patriotic Alternative, which are described as neo-Nazi. Today's new extremism definition will be used to assess which groups should be blocked from public funding. But Michael Gove has insisted it's not about silencing those with private and peaceful beliefs. A boy has admitted killing 15-year-old Eliane Andam near a school in Croydon. She was stabbed to death after meeting friends on her way to school in September of last year. The 17-year-old suspect, who can't be identified because of his age, has pleaded guilty to manslaughter but denies murdering Eliane. Prosecutors haven't, though, accepted his plea, and he will go on trial later this year. Russia has been accused of disrupting the GPS signal on the Defence Secretary's plane en route to Poland. The incident occurred as the RAF jet flew close to the edge of Kaliningrad. GPS navigation and internet access was lost on board for around 30 minutes during the flight. But pilots have confirmed the aircraft was never at risk. The incident happened as Grant Shapps visits the British troops participating in NATO exercises in Poland. And a review into air traffic control issues that caused widespread chaos during last August's bank holiday weekend has found that a significant lack of pre-planning took place. Nearly 750,000 passengers were disrupted when flights were grounded at UK airports on the 28th of August. It was after the National Air Traffic Services suffered a technical glitch. An interim report has found that a lack of rehearsal for such incidents of that nature and scale. Those are the headlines. For more, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Most of us will see a bit of rain today, but across eastern England, it may well stay mostly dry, and that's where we'll see some pretty high temperatures as well. Low pressure, though, is still controlling our weather, and these two weather fronts are moving across the country, both providing some outbreaks of rain, persistent rain through central and southern Scotland. Soggy old afternoon here, bit of snow likely on the tops of the hills, but much of the Highlands, the Northern Isles, will stay dry and bright. And mostly dry across East Anglia and the southeast, although we will see lots more cloud coming in. But showery rain for Wales and southwest England. Look at the temperature there for England and Wales. Very mild, 16 with a bit of brightness. We could reach 17 Celsius. Feeling cold, though, with that persistent rain over the central belt of Scotland. That rain does linger through much of tonight as well. More showers to come for Northern Ireland. There'll be some showery rain for England and Wales. And then through the second half of the night, we'll see some heavier rain coming into Wales and the far southwest. May have the odd rumble of thunder mixed in with that. Another pretty mild night, certainly for England and Wales. A bit of a chilly one in the far north of Scotland, where the winds are coming in from the north. Still providing a bit of snow over the tops of the hills. Another fairly damp day for Scotland. Some heavy showery rain along the M4 and the M25 early on Friday. That'll clear away, and then we're left with a mixture of bright or sunny spells, but plenty of showers to come as well. Again, fairly mild across England and Wales, though it will be breezier. Another pretty chilly one in Scotland.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 36 minutes past 2, and to return now to our exclusive interview with the Defence Secretary Grant Shapps. It's emerged in the last half an hour that Russia jammed a flight navigation system of the RAF plane carrying Mr. Shapps to visit NATO exercises in Poland.
Yes, the only broadcast journalist, you may recognise him on that flight with the Defence Secretary, was our very own Ray Addison there, who joins us now in the studio. He's back. Ray...
He made it alive.
He made it alive.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it was an interesting flight, to say the least. It was obviously in the company of the Defence Secretary Grant Shapps from the UK through to Poland, and right from the takeoff to the landing, it was certainly an eventful flight.
And why was it eventful? Were you aware during that flight that there was some tampering going on? And frankly, did you know where the tampering was coming from?
Well, questions were certainly raised because I noticed, obviously, we did have internet on that flight, and I noticed both on the outward journey and the return leg that intermittently that internet would stop working, and we were informed as we were coming back to the United Kingdom from Poland that was most likely down to Russians, the Russian government blocking the signal as we flew over Kaliningrad. Now, of course, this is a Russian enclave that they're in control of between Poland and Lithuania, and we were told that very much like Russian forces will block signals in Ukraine being one of the most blocked countries in the world, one of the most jammed signal countries in the world. They are doing the same with Kaliningrad as well, and that affected the GPS of our plane, which I guess is the most significant part of the story. Internet's one thing, but GPS of the flight is certainly very significant.
Yes, and Ray, do we have an idea of whether the Russian government deliberately targeted this particular flight and the Defence Secretary himself?
Well, I think the understanding is that this is a process that the Russian government tends to do in general. So they do it in Ukraine, they do it wherever they have military operations in place. So it wasn't, we understand, to deliberately block the flight of the Defence Secretary. It's just a side effect, as it were, of the general blocking of the territories that they are in control of. Now, luckily, there was no risk, we were told, to us or to the flight, because obviously we have, very, very well-trained RAF pilots, so they were able to use other measures to navigate, although the details of exactly what that was not explained to us.
It's almost as if you'd expect in a modern battlefield setting there would be contingencies. They will have been trained for this sort of field of exercise. But Ray, getting to the reason you actually went to Poland with the Defence Secretary, this was to view a NATO exercise and presumably to send a strong signal to the world that the UK is foursquare behind NATO.
Yeah, absolutely. We have thousands of soldiers from all of the NATO countries taking part in this operation. And the operation we saw in particular, which we'll show exclusive details of here on GB News tomorrow, was between Poland and the United Kingdom. And of course, Grant Shapps was there to view that exercise, to meet the troops and give them, some encouragement as well, and find out how that training is going on. And that team there is able to deploy within 48 hours to respond to any threat that may pose itself. And obviously they're working across many different languages, many different countries, and so they have these exercises to make sure that if the worst does happen, they're able to respond as quickly as possible.
And Ray, we understand you also asked the Defence Secretary about Trump. Should we have a watch?
It is very important and will cost us a lot less money if we understand that defeating Russia and Putin in Ukraine is a lot less expensive than him moving further to the west, either to the rest of Ukraine or worse still, to places like Poland.
Strong words there from the Defence Secretary, Ray.
Yeah, I mean, Grant Shapps was saying, look, it's certainly a long time until the results of the US election will be determined. Obviously, it's going to be taking place in November of this year, and a lot can happen between now and then, he was saying. However, he does trust that despite all the rhetoric from Donald Trump about ending the war between Ukraine and Russia within 24 hours, and a lot of people taking that to mean that he could essentially stop funding Ukraine and force President Zelensky to hand territory over to President Putin in that way. He's saying that he doesn't think so. He believes that Donald Trump likes to back a winner and wouldn't like to be seen as weak by other nations, and therefore he does feel that support will continue.
It's interesting. You can always see the triangulation that is taking place in the event that Donald Trump does win. He's leading in the polls currently in the United States. And I suppose Britain will have to try and, rather than shout at him and harangue him and tell him he's a nasty man, orange man bad, they'll have to sort of say, look, come on, let's work with this together and perhaps through a carrot rather than a stick.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And it wouldn't be for the first time. Obviously, he is the former president of the United States, had a reasonably good relationship with the United Kingdom during that time, although no trade deal was agreed. That's something they'd certainly be pushing for. But obviously, often, as journalists, we focus on the big story of the day. As the government, they're looking months and years in advance. And obviously, one of the considerations they'll be factoring in, what happens if Joe Biden continues as president, or what happens if Donald Trump takes over, and they'll be factoring all of that into a lot of their decisions.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Ray, and nice to have you safely back in the studio where you belong. Thank you, Ray Addison, GB News reporter. Gosh, it's interesting that you hear after you've already arrived safely that something happened while you were mid-air, and then it all fits together, why the Wi-Fi was down, why the, issues with GPS and all of that.
Oh, yeah, no, concerning stuff. But coming up on the programme, we'll be looking at the royal rift between Prince William and Prince Harry. That shows signs of continuing. The brothers are to attend a memorial event for their mother, Princess Diana, but separately. More on that after this.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. Every night from 11 p.m. Mail on Sunday, and the University of Buckingham is calling out wokery at the University of Cambridge. So I guess the culture wars must be almost over then, Josh.
Almost, yeah. Cambridge University discriminating against rich, white, privileged, privately educated men, claims...
The worst
which
kind.
Is, yeah, basically me. Claims Vice-Chancellor of rival institution, which is launching a degree course on the rise of woke culture. Now, I 100% agree with this. I applied to get into Cambridge, and I didn't get in because I was too thick.
Oh, wow, so it wasn't the DEI mafia?
No, unfortunately, it was pre-DEI. So it's like a double insult now.
Were you one of those guys who was like had a B, a B average? You know, you look like you should be an A because you act like an A.
I act like an A.
You act
I've
like
got
an
glasses.
A. Yeah,
they're fake. I don't even have to. They don't even have lenses in them.
Lewis, do you think that this is a little bit cynical? Because I looked up this University of Buckingham, and they opened in 1973, and their tagline on the internet is "the home of the two-year degree." They're trying to bring down Cambridge University with this.
Well, why not pick the biggest? I mean, that's why we should. We should be attacking the BBC 24/7 on this thing.
I thought we were.
We aren't. We don't mention it enough.
Listen.
What I found shocking about this story is Buckingham is the country's oldest private university, and was founded in 1976. Something is wrong there. What do you think? Was Oxford founded by the government? I don't think it was. Was Cambridge?
No, absolutely not. I looked up Cambridge was 1209.
Yes, exactly.
So you can
it
get...
wasn't a government
But this
grant.
is actually quite scary. They can do a course on the origins of the woke movement. I'm just saying, someone's going to have a degree, and our job is going to be under threat. They're going to know much more than us.
Never.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests, and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
It's 2:46, and Prince Harry and Prince William will address a memorial for their late mother, Princess Diana, tonight. But the brothers won't be appearing at the same time.
Curious. The Prince of Wales is set to give a speech in person, whilst Prince Harry will make a virtual appearance by video call after his brother has left the event, giving signs that the royal rift rumbles on.
Well, for more on this, shall we bring in our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker, who has the latest for us. Cameron, is this deliberate, that they don't want to be involved in the same event at the same time? What's going on?
Well, of course, we'd never get confirmation, Emily, but I think anyone giving an educated guess would draw that conclusion. So what we know is that it is the 25th anniversary of the Diana Legacy Awards. It was set up with Princess Diana's belief that young people have the power to change the world for the better, which, of course, is kind of a cause close to Prince William and Harry's heart, and Princess Diana's legacy clearly rubs off on both of them. However, despite the fact it's the 25th anniversary, Prince William will be there in person this evening at the Science Museum for the award ceremony. He will give a speech and he will be presenting the awards to the winners. But it won't be until after William's left that Prince Harry will appear virtually via video call to meet the winners virtually and perhaps will give a speech as well, although that's not been confirmed. But what it does is highlight the clearly continued rifts between the two brothers that it appears, I'm not saying this is true, but it appears that they are unwilling to be joining the same event at the same time.
And yet, Karen, there'll be those that say Prince Harry is thousands of miles away. He's in the United States of America. Might we not expect them to sort of one appear by video link and one appear in person? Is this all a mountain being made out of a molehill?
Well, it's not the fact that one's appearing via video link and one's appearing in person. It's the fact that it's happening at completely separate times. I think it's pretty easy for Prince William to stand on a stage and Prince Harry to appear on the screen behind him at the same time logistically. But in terms of the relationships, it appears, because we haven't, because according to lots of reports, that's not going to happen. And Prince Harry's only taking part after Prince William has left, or at least in a private room. So it is highlighting that rift, as I say. But what it also does is show the determination of Prince William and Harry, despite the perhaps personal rift between them, that they want to honour the legacy of their mother by taking part in this award ceremony, something they have done many years in the past. 2017, I think they were pictured together on the stage giving out the awards to those young people, those recipients. But clearly it's not happened since then. But I think they're both determined to honour their mother's legacy.
Well, let's be frank. It suggests that the two brothers very much don't want to have anything to do with each other, really.
Well, you've got to look at what's happened over the last few years. First, we had Megxit, that Sandringham summit, in Prince Harry's memoir Spare and in subsequent interviews for it. He alleges that Prince William was shouting and screaming at him in Sandringham during that summit, something Kensington Palace has never talked about. Then we have the whole book and everything else, all the other allegations in the book, and of course the Netflix documentary as well. And the royal family are incredibly private, but Harry and Meghan have become a bit of a headache, or at least over the last 3 years they have been, and that would have really deeply hurt William as someone who will be king one day. And we haven't really seen any sign of any contact between the brothers, even when Harry flew back across the Atlantic last minute following the king's cancer diagnosis. William and him did not meet up. Now, we were told by someone in Kensington Palace, a source in Kensington Palace, that there were no plans to meet up. But clearly you think if your brother's flying across the Atlantic, perhaps you would make that happen, and it clearly hasn't happened. We're never going to be given the exact reason why, but as I said, I think you can make a pretty educated guess.
Yes, it's sad that they can't even get together for such an occasion as this for their late mother. But thank you very much, Cameron Walker, our royal correspondent. Good to speak to you. Shall we finish up with a few views on everything that's been going on during the show? About Michael Gove, firstly.
Yes, you've been getting in touch, and Jim has said Gove is absolutely right. Everyone knows there are Islamic extremists and right-wing extremists.
You know, Pam says, I think this is interesting, and I think she's probably right, unfortunately. Mr Gove has named several organisations which will not receive government funding, etc. Isn't Mr Gove being a tad naive? These organisations will just change their names, the people pulling the strings will be the same, and they'll also change their names. I think you might be right, actually, because with some of these extremist groups, they do have splinter groups, and they can change their names to then be perceived as moderate for a while, and then they get found out, and then they change again. I think that is actually quite common practice.
But I think the point that Pam might miss here is that there will now be an official list of these groups that have been determined to be extremist. And so if you're a group that's wanting to seem as you're not extremist, hiring someone who has previously worked at one of the groups that have been mentioned here, whether it's those that might go on the list, the ones that Michael Gove, under parliamentary privilege in the House of Commons earlier today, suggested, whether they're the Muslim Brotherhood, Cage, MEND, or indeed the far-right groups, Patriotic Alternative and British National Socialist group. If you've worked for one of those, suddenly that's on your record.
Yes, but how long does it take for them to go through all the rigmarole, make sure they've got it completely right, get it signed off by all the various officials and the government ministers and all this? It's going to take a long time. They'll always be playing catch-up.
Although Anthony says all those parties and people who are extremist are obviously in panic mode and against the new, clearer definitions. I think Michael Gove has got it right. We all know why he's done it, so they should shut up and put up.
Yes, well, there you go. Keep your views coming in. Martin's going to be up next very shortly. I'm sure he's got a cracking show lined up. He'll be delving into this extremism definition, perhaps. Martin, tell us, what is coming up on your show?
Yeah, bang on, guys. Yeah, this definition of extremism. What does it actually mean? And the naming of two far-right groups. Can you imagine my surprise? Well, the British National Socialist movement hasn't existed since 1968. It was driven out of London by a riot
by communists? Are they over-egging the pudding on the threat of the far right? We'll have the full details on that. We'll talk to a police and crime commissioner for her evidence of this extremism at grassroots level. At last, Grant Shapps decides to spend 3% on defence. What took him so long? Putin is spending 8%. Meanwhile, we've got the smallest army since Napoleonic times, the smallest RAF in history, and the Navy is more concerned about pronouns and climate change than actually get involved in wars. And an exclusive shock report into the state of the NHS reveals that only 50% of NHS staff are now medically qualified, proving that the NHS is now an army of pen pushers. And guess what? 29% increase in doctors since Brexit. Do you remember we were told that we would have no doctors left in this country? Another Project Fear myth has been completely dispelled. That's all kind of on my show, 3 to 6 p.m. Martin Dalby Show. But first, it's time for your latest weather forecast.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Most of us will see a bit of rain today, but across eastern England, it may well stay mostly dry, and that's where we'll see some pretty high temperatures as well. Low pressure, though, is still controlling our weather, and these two weather fronts are moving across the country, both providing some outbreaks of rain, persistent rain through central and southern Scotland. Soggy old afternoon here, bit of snow likely on the tops of the hills, but much of the Highlands, the Northern Isles, will stay dry and bright. And mostly dry across East Anglia and the southeast, although we will see lots more cloud coming in. But showery rain for Wales and southwest England. Look at the temperature there for England and Wales. Very mild, 16 with a bit of brightness. We could reach 17 Celsius. Feeling cold, though, with that persistent rain over the central belt of Scotland. That rain does linger through much of tonight as well. More showers to come for Northern Ireland. There'll be some showery rain for England and Wales. And then through the second half of the night, we'll see some heavier rain coming into Wales and the far southwest. And may have the odd rumble of thunder mixed in with that. Another pretty mild night, certainly for England and Wales. A bit of a chilly one in the far north of Scotland, where the winds are coming in from the north. Still providing a bit of snow over the tops of the hills. Another fairly damp day for Scotland. Some heavy showery rain along the M4 and the M25 early on Friday. That'll clear away, and then we're left with a mixture of bright or sunny spells, but plenty of showers to come as well. Again, fairly mild across England and Wales, though it will be breezier. Another pretty chilly one in Scotland.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got cash, treats and a spring shopping spree to be won in a great British giveaway. You could win an amazing £12,345 in tax-free cash. Plus, there's a further £500 of shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. We'll also give you a gadget package to use in your garden this spring. That includes a games console, a pizza oven and a portable smart speaker, so you can listen to GB News on the go. For another chance to win the vouchers, the treats and £12,345 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB03 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday the 29th of March. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if watching or listening on demand. Good luck.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria DiPiero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task. This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers. I agree. And that's precisely what I'll get. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Brand new Sundays from 6 p.m. The Neil Oliver Show.
It's absolutely vital that people are given the opportunity to take part in the debate, to say the things that matter to them, to be challenged. A country is only really a shared dream as long as enough people have a shared